In the bedrock of civilization, beneath the dust of empires, a persistent legend endures. It is a story told in fragments, an echo of a time when beings of immense stature and formidable power walked the earth. They are the ghosts in our most ancient histories, figures who were more than human yet less than divine. Their presence is a shadow cast across millennia, a question etched into the very soul of our past. But who or what were they really? They are known by a single resonant name, the Nephilim. It is a name that thunders through sacred texts and forbidden lore, hinting at a truth both magnificent and terrifying. Their story is not a simple myth, but a foundational piece of a much larger puzzle, one that speaks to humanity's origins, our purpose, and our place within a divinely orchestrated yet profoundly chaotic world. This is an expedition into that fallen world. We will not merely recount a legend, we will unravel an enigma of cosmic consequence. Meticulously, we will explore the foundational biblical accounts, weigh diverse theological interpretations, and trace the indelible mark these beings left upon the fabric of ancient civilization and the landscape of enduring spiritual warfare. Prepare to confront a narrative that challenges the boundaries of our accepted reality. A story that forces us to question the lines we draw between heaven and earth, between the mortal and the divine. For in the tale of the Nephilim, we may find a reflection of our own deepest struggles and the profound implications of a lineage born of two worlds. In the shadowed annals of antiquity, before the great waters rose to cleanse the world, lies a story. It is not a myth whispered in fragments, but a proto-narrative etched into the very foundation of the biblical record. A brief, cryptic passage of only 4 verses nestled within the book of Genesis. It is here, in the 6th chapter, that we find the bedrock of a profound enigma, the story of the Nephilim. This is not merely an ancient tale of giants, it is a theological linchpin, the key to understanding the precipitous moral decline of the pre-flood world and a catalyst for a judgment so absolute it would unmake creation. The account begins with a statement of disarming simplicity, a demographic observation that ripples with unspoken portent. When mankind began to multiply on the earth and daughters were born to them, a world teeming with new life, a flourishing of humanity across the face of a young planet. But this gentle expansion, this picture of growth and innocence, sets the stage for a violation of cosmic proportions. The narrative lens immediately shifts from the terrestrial to the celestial, introducing figures of immense power and mysterious origin. For in this burgeoning world, we are told, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful. Who were these sons of God, and by what authority did they cross the sacred line between their world and ours? Their desire, born of sight, leads to an act of transgression. They married any of them they chose. This is not a portrait of romance, but of acquisition, a violation of established boundaries that introduces an unprecedented hybridity into the fabric of creation. The divine response is immediate and severe, a voice of sorrowful judgment cutting through the chaos. Then the Lord said, "My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years." This divine decree is no arbitrary act. The text directly links the illicit union to a limitation on human life, a foreshadowing of the final, all-encompassing judgment to come. An age of legendary longevity was drawing to a close, brought down by a forbidden mingling of realms. It is in the shadow of this decree that they finally appear. The verse that follows is one of the most debated in all of Scripture. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. Here their existence is stated as a fact, an established presence in the antediluvian world. But the grammar of the Hebrew is tantalizingly ambiguous. It forces us to ask a startling question: were the Nephilim the direct offspring of this union, a new race of demigods born from a forbidden fusion? Or were they a pre-existing group, a formidable presence whose dark influence was simply exacerbated by the arrival of these children? The text, in its stark brevity, holds both possibilities in a delicate, unnerving balance. These beings are described with two powerful Hebrew phrases, Gibborim and Anshe Hashem, the heroes of old, men of renown. This is not necessarily a compliment. In the ancient world, a hero was often a warlord, a tyrant, a figure of terrifying power and ambition. To be a man of renown was to have a name that echoed with conquest and might. This description paints a picture of a world dominated by formidable beings whose influence permeated the land, contributing to the great wickedness and the violence that would soon grieve God to his very heart. Their presence is the final, definitive symptom of a world spiraling into chaos. This entire episode, these 4 shocking verses, serves a critical literary and theological function. It is a bridging passage, a dark prelude that provides the necessary context for the story of Noah and the Great Flood. Without this account of a boundary shattered, of a sacred order defiled, the sheer scale of the flood can seem inexplicable. Genesis 6:1-4 provides the reason. It unveils an extraordinary corruption that has taken root in creation, a corruption so deep it necessitates a complete and total cleansing. It hints at a vast, unseen spiritual conflict unfolding just behind the veil of the physical realm. And so we are left with the text itself. A few hundred words that have launched millennia of debate, art, and fear. Its meaning is not surrendered easily. The profound implications, coupled with the sheer brevity of the account, compel us to become textual archaeologists. We must weigh the semantic nuances of each Hebrew term, Bene Ha-Elohim, Nephilim, Gibborim, to illuminate the passage's intrinsic meaning, to peel back the layers of later interpretation and stare into the heart of the original story. For within these ancient words lies the key to a lost world and a warning that has echoed through all of human history. In the ancient pages of Genesis, before the world was drowned, there is a passage, a brief, cryptic, and deeply unsettling account of a time when the boundaries between heaven and earth seemed to dissolve. It speaks of the sons of God who saw the daughters of men, and from their union, a new kind of being walked the earth. For millennia, this passage has echoed, demanding an explanation. What does it mean? And who, or what, were the sons of God? The most ancient and enduring answer to this question is also the most shocking. It is a story not of men, but of angels. A narrative whispered in the shadow of Scripture, positing that the sons of God were celestial beings who abandoned their posts, descending from a heavenly abode to forge a prohibited union with mortal women. This is the angelic interpretation, an explanation with roots sunk deep in early Jewish tradition, flourishing in the fertile period between the Testaments. It found its most vivid expression in apocryphal texts like the Book of Enoch, which names these beings the Watchers, sentinels who forsook their sacred duty for earthly lust. This was not a fringe theory born in a vacuum. Proponents argue that the New Testament itself contains powerful echoes of this cosmic transgression. The Apostle Jude writes of angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, and who are now kept in everlasting chains for a future judgment. The text is stark, and for many, the proper dwelling they abandoned was not a place, but a state of being, a spiritual existence they traded for a physical one. This haunting verse is seen as a direct reference, a key unlocking the mystery of Genesis 6. A parallel account in the second letter of Peter reinforces the narrative. It speaks of a specific angelic sin for which God did not spare them, but cast them into darkness, bound and awaiting judgment. The timing and severity of this punishment placed directly before a mention of the Great Flood, has led countless scholars to connect the two events. They see a causal link, a primeval angelic rebellion that directly precipitated the cleansing of the world. The sin of the Watchers was the catalyst for the flood. The theological implications of this view are staggering. It suggests a direct, physical incursion of supernatural evil into the human lineage, a corruption that went beyond moral persuasion and into the very fabric of biology. The lines between the divine and the human were not just crossed, they were violently erased. This was an act of cosmic sabotage, an attempt to pollute God's creation at its source, leading to monstrous offspring that were neither fully human nor fully angelic, an unholy synthesis of spirit and flesh. The sin of the Watchers, therefore, was not merely one of lust. It was a profound transgression against the created order, a metaphysical treason. By interfering with humanity, they were interfering with God's ultimate plan, tainting the world he had called good. The pervasive wickedness that filled the earth before the flood, in this light, becomes more than just human depravity. It becomes the shadow cast by this higher rebellion, a world groaning under the weight of an unnatural presence. This interpretation frames the entire saga as an act of spiritual warfare. Malevolent celestial forces, actively working to thwart the divine will, made the earth their battlefield. And their children, the Nephilim, were the tangible, terrifying proof of their rebellion. When Genesis calls them heroes of old, men of renown, the angelic view hears a chilling undertone. Their renown was born of their hybrid nature, a strength, a size, perhaps even a lifespan, that was fundamentally alien to humanity. They were living monuments to a violated covenant. For centuries, this was the prevailing view among early church luminaries like Justin Martyr and Tertullian. They accepted the story of the Watchers as a literal account of history. Yet, over time, mainstream thought began to shift, troubled by questions of angelic corporeality. How could a spirit being procreate with a human? These theological and philosophical hurdles caused the interpretation to wane in popularity, but it never vanished. It remains a powerful and captivating lens, a story of forbidden love and cosmic war that gives the fall of the ancient world a scale that is nothing short of epic. It reminds us that sometimes the greatest threats do not rise from the dust, but fall from the stars. In the ancient memory of the world, before the great cleansing flood, Scripture speaks of a time of profound corruption. It tells of a mysterious union, a transgression so great it moved the heavens to grief. The text is cryptic, haunting. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. From this union, giants were born, and violence filled the earth. For millennia, this passage has been understood as a tale of fallen angels, of celestial beings descending to corrupt humanity. But there is another interpretation, an ancient and powerful counter-narrative, one that finds the source of this darkness not in the heavens above, but within the human heart itself. This is the Sethite interpretation. It argues that the cataclysmic sin of the ancient world was not an angelic invasion, but a human betrayal. It posits that the sons of God were not supernatural entities, but the men of a specific righteous lineage, the descendants of Seth, Adam's third son. In the wake of Abel's murder and Cain's exile, Seth's birth represented the survival of a godly seed, a line of people who began to call on the name of the Lord. They were the keepers of the faith, a people set apart. In stark contrast stood the daughters of men, the descendants of the worldly and unrighteous line of Cain. This view reframes the drama from a cosmic rebellion to a profoundly human tragedy. The foundation of this argument rests on a simple but crucial premise. The title Sons of God is not exclusively reserved for angels. Proponents point to the wider tapestry of Scripture, where the term is used to describe a covenant relationship with the divine. In Deuteronomy, the people of Israel are called the children of the Lord your God. The Psalms speak of the righteous as God's congregation, and the prophet Hosea foretells a day when they will be called sons of the living God. In this light, the title becomes a designation of character and commitment, not of celestial origin. The story of Genesis 6, therefore, is not about different species, but about two distinct spiritual cultures, two divergent paths for humanity. The narrative of Genesis itself draws this line in the sand from the very beginning. It is a story of two seeds: the path of Cain, marked by jealousy, murder, and the building of worldly cities, and the path of Seth, marked by worship and communion with God. The Sethite interpretation sees these as two rivers of humanity flowing through the early world, one carrying the promise of redemption, the other the currents of rebellion. The great sin, then, was the breaking down of the dam between them. It was a catastrophic spiritual compromise where the righteous lineage, the sons of God, abandoned their sacred distinction. They saw the daughters of men, the women of the worldly Canaanite culture, and were seduced not just by their beauty, but by the allure of a life untethered from God. This was not a singular event, but a generational decay. The intermarriage between the godly and the ungodly represented the erosion of faith, a slow poisoning of the well. The values, the worldliness, and the idolatry of the Canaanite line began to seep into the Sethite lineage, until the distinction between them all but vanished. What was lost was not merely a set of rules, but a sacred identity. The very people tasked with preserving the divine memory and righteous hope on earth chose instead to merge with the world that stood in opposition to it. This complete moral collapse, a widespread apostasy, is what saturated the world with a wickedness so pervasive that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Human responsibility, not angelic meddling, stands at the center of the indictment. And what of the Nephilim, the mighty heroes of old? In this interpretation, they are not the monstrous, semi-divine offspring of angels. Instead, they are the product of these unholy unions, men of great power but of no virtue. They are the human tyrants, the violent warlords and ruthless strongmen born from a generation that had forgotten God. Their fame, their renown, was earned through cruelty and oppression, the bitter fruit of a culture that had forsaken righteousness for power. They were not a supernatural anomaly. They were the terrifying yet wholly human endpoint of spiritual compromise. This perspective, championed by early church fathers like Augustine of Hippo, gained prominence for its theological coherence. It avoids the difficult and speculative questions of how ethereal beings could procreate with humans, keeping the focus firmly on the central theme of the biblical narrative, human sin and the need for redemption. It offers a story not of cosmic monsters, but of the monster that can rise within humanity when its sacred calling is abandoned. While perhaps less dramatic than the fall of angels, the Sethite view presents a warning that is arguably more intimate, more immediate. It tells a story of a slow, insidious corruption, of how the light of the world can be dimmed not by a violent external assault, but by the quiet, consensual blurring of lines that should never have been crossed. It is a timeless lesson on the fragility of righteousness and the devastating cost of losing one's way. Before history was carved into stone, it was etched in myth. In the primeval narrative of Genesis, a dark and enigmatic passage describes a world spiraling into chaos. It tells of a time when the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and from their union, a fearsome progeny was born. For millennia, this story has been cloaked in the supernatural, a tale of fallen angels and a corrupted human bloodline. But what if the truth is not a story of beings who fell from heaven, but of men who tried to ascend to it from thrones of their own making? What if the horror was entirely terrifyingly human? There exists a less traveled, yet profoundly resonant interpretation of this ancient crisis, one that looks past the celestial and into the heart of human power. This is the royal dynasty theory, a view that sees the sons of God not as divine beings, but as the first tyrants. They are the mighty kings and despotic chieftains of the antediluvian world, men who wrap themselves in the mantle of divinity, a practice common across the ancient Near East. Their godhood was not an inheritance from the heavens, but a title seized by the sword, a claim declared from a throne built on the backs of the oppressed. In this earthly drama, the phrase "sons of God" becomes a chilling honorific, a title for a ruling class drunk on its own supremacy. They are the powerful who, like the pharaohs and Mesopotamian kings to come, asserted a divine right to rule, to own, to take. The daughters of men are not a separate lineage, but simply the common people, the subjects under their iron-fisted dominion. The scripture says the rulers took wives from any of them they chose. This was not romance. It was appropriation. It was the unchecked prerogative of a king, forcibly building vast harems to secure a legacy, to sire an army of heirs, and to display his power in the most possessive way imaginable. The result was a society poisoned from the top down. The injustice was not a cosmic spill, but a deliberate human architecture of corruption and abuse. The widespread violence described in Genesis was the logical outcome of a world governed by the whims of the powerful, where the sacred worth of the individual was erased by the ambition of the sovereign. And from these forced unions came a new generation, born into this legacy of dominance, the Nephilim. In this view, they are not supernatural hybrids, but the formidable, often cruel offspring of these dynastic tyrants. They inherited their father's might and their insatiable thirst for control. They became the heroes of old, men of renown, not for their virtue, but for their prowess in conquest, their talent for oppression. Their renown was the echo of fear. This interpretation finds its footing not only in ancient political structures, but within the Bible itself. The Old Testament is filled with prophetic denunciations of arrogant kings who usurp divine authority, rulers of Babylon and Tyre who dare to say, "I am a god." The Genesis account becomes the archetype for this very human sin, the corrupting influence of absolute power. The culture of the ancient world provides the context. Polygamy was a tool of statecraft, a means to forge alliances and ensure a dynasty's survival. What Genesis 6 depicts is this practice twisted into its most lawless form, an engine of pure self-aggrandizement that defied all moral law. This perspective grounds the story firmly in the soil of human experience. It suggests the Great Flood was not a response to a mythological transgression, but to a profound and catastrophic failure of human governance. The problem was not an intrusion from another world, but a cancer that grew within our own, the unchecked human capacity for tyranny. It paints a picture of a society so thoroughly dominated by violent, powerful men that its very foundation had rotted away. The world was not just wicked, it was broken by its own leaders. While it may lack the epic supernatural intrigue of angelic visitations, the royal dynasty interpretation offers something perhaps more haunting: a mirror. It presents a sociological explanation for the pre-flood world that is chillingly familiar. It is a timeless warning about the dangers of absolute power, the moral vacuum it creates, and the human cost of a leader's ambition. It asks us to look at this ancient story and see not a fable of gods and monsters, but the first dark chapter in the long, brutal history of human hegemony. Before the world was drowned, before history was cleaved in two by a global flood, there was a name. It is a name that echoes from the deepest antiquity, whispered in the shadow of Eden. More than a label, it is a definition, a verdict, and a prophecy, all contained within 3 Hebrew syllables: Nephilim. To understand the age that was lost to the waters, we must first understand the weight of this word, for in its very letters lies the story of a world undone. The name's most ancient and accepted root is the Hebrew verb naphal, a simple word, yet one of profound consequence. It means to fall. From this single powerful action, the identity of the Nephilim branches into a series of haunting possibilities. The first and most direct is that they were the fallen ones. This interpretation paints them as beings defined by a great descent, a loss of grace. It suggests a nature inherited, a corruption passed down from their progenitors, the mysterious sons of God. If their fathers were celestial beings who fell from heaven, then the Nephilim are the living testament to that trespass, a race born of cosmic rebellion, forever marked by their fallen origin. But the grammar of ancient Hebrew allows for another, more sinister reading. The verb naphal can also carry an active, aggressive meaning. not just those who have fallen, but those who fall upon others. In this light, the Nephilim are not passive inheritors of a fallen state. They are its agents. They are the assailants, the aggressors, the ones who cause others to fall. This etymology transforms them from tragic figures into architects of ruin, casting them as the violent, oppressive force that dragged the world into a mire of wickedness. Their name becomes a synonym for predation, a banner for the chaos that consumed the earth. Were they merely the children of a tragic fall, or were they the very instruments of its acceleration? When the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek centuries before Christ, a new layer was fused to their identity. The translators, searching for a word to capture their essence, chose gigantes, giants. This single choice would forever cement the image of the Nephilim in the popular imagination. Beings of colossal stature, titans of flesh and bone whose physical presence was as overwhelming as their moral corruption. It forces us to ask a crucial question. Was their name primarily a description of their spiritual status, their fallenness, or their physical attribute, their size? The biblical narrative suggests there is no division. Their terrifying physical power was not separate from their inner nature. It was the outward expression of it. They were giants of sin as much as giants of stature, their might a weapon for their inherent depravity. The Genesis account complicates their identity further, bestowing upon them a title that seems, at first, contradictory. It calls them Gibborim, the mighty ones, the heroes of old, men of renown. But the concept of heroism in the ancient world was not always tied to virtue. It was often a measure of power, of martial prowess, of a fame earned through conquest and might. In the context of the Nephilim, this was a fearsome renown. They were the awe-inspiring, terrifying figures of their age, legends whose stories were built not on righteousness, but on a power that bent the world to their will. They were the culmination of an age's ambition, the terrifying pinnacle of a humanity that had strayed impossibly far from its design. This fascination with god-men and powerful hybrids was not unique to the Hebrews. Echoes of such beings resonate through the mythologies of the ancient Near East, from the Apkallu of Mesopotamia to the demigods of Greece. These parallels do not suggest borrowing, but rather a shared human preoccupation with the transgression of boundaries. The boundary between heaven and earth, divine and mortal, order and chaos. The Nephilim represent the Hebrew articulation of this universal terror, a story of profound spiritual and physical anomaly. Ultimately, to decipher the name is to unlock the narrative. The word Nephilim is not just an identifier, it is the theological axis upon which the entire pre-flood world turns. It signifies a fracture in the created order, a corruption so deep it could not be healed, only excised. They were the fallen, and they were those who caused the world to fall with them. Their very existence was a challenge to heaven, a living embodiment of the chaos that made the coming deluge not just an act of wrath, but an act of necessity. Before history was written in stone, it was whispered in awe and terror. It is a story that begins not with kings or empires, but with a shadow that fell across the ancient world, a shadow cast by beings who were more than men. They were the Nephilim. The name itself hints at their nature, the fallen ones. But it is the word most often associated with them that truly captures the human imagination: giants. Yet, to understand them, we must realize that giant is not merely a measure of height. It is a definition of power, a testament to a presence so overwhelming it warped the very fabric of early civilization. This was a gigantism of physicality, of prowess, and of a pervasive terror that seeped into the heart of humanity. It was the defining feature of an age teetering on the edge of divine judgment. The earliest accounts are frustratingly spare, offering no precise measurements for these antediluvian titans. But the echoes of their scale thunder down through the ages. Later texts, describing their post-flood descendants, give us a chilling frame of reference. The champion Goliath, standing at 6 cubits and a span, a colossal figure approaching 10 feet tall, armored in bronze. And King Og of Bashan, the last of his kind, whose iron bedstead stretched over 13 feet long, a bed built for a monster. These are not just men of great stature. They are beings of a different order, a physical challenge to the world they inhabited. Imagine this immense scale translated into raw power. The strength of such a being would be unparalleled, their every movement an act of casual dominance. A Nephilim warrior would be a living siege engine, their fists like hammers, their voice a roar that could shatter the morale of an army. As builders, they could raise megalithic structures that would mystify later generations. As oppressors, they could command absolute obedience through sheer physical intimidation. They did not simply live upon the landscape. They dominated it, and in doing so, they dominated the lives of ordinary men and women. But their influence, their prowess, was not confined to brute force. The ancient texts call them the Gibborim, the mighty ones, the men of renown. This was not necessarily a compliment. Renown can be born of virtue, but it is more often born of power and fear. Their might likely extended to cunning, to a terrifying form of leadership that bent human tribes to their will. They were the original warlords, figures of such formidable and violent influence that their deeds became the stuff of legend, their names synonymous not with heroism, but with a power that could not be defied. The sheer biological reality of such creatures would have strained the limits of their world. What were their dietary needs? How much food, how much water would be required to sustain a body of that magnitude? Their existence may have been a blight upon the land, their appetites fueling scarcity and conflict. Every resource they consumed was one denied to the growing human population, making their very presence a source of the increasing strife that was beginning to define the era. And what of the psychological dimension? What is it like to live in a world where you are not the apex species, to toil in the shadow of beings whose stride is the length of your entire dwelling? The awe inspired by the Nephilim would have been inseparable from fear. This potent combination is the bedrock of control, the foundation of cults. They would have been seen as demigods, their authority absolute. It is not difficult to imagine human societies forced to offer them tribute, sacrifice, or even worship, cementing a dark new order on the earth. Their presence provides a chilling context for the biblical declaration that the earth had become filled with Hamas, a Hebrew word that means more than just violence. It implies a deep-seated corruption, a predatory cruelty, and a lawlessness born of injustice. The Nephilim, with their superior strength and capacity for oppression, were likely the primary agents of this decay, their reign making a mockery of human morality and divine order. Their very nature was an affront, a symbol of a creation gone terribly wrong. Across the ancient Near East, cultural memory is filled with similar figures. Monstrous, giant beings often depicted as the offspring of gods, or as the primal forces of chaos that had to be slain by a hero king. The Nephilim tap into this deep primal apprehension of the colossal and the overwhelming, but in their story, they are not merely a mythological foe. They are presented as a historical reality, an aberration of biology and spirit. Their gigantism was a physical manifestation of a spiritual truth, that a sacred boundary had been crossed. They were living symbols of a corruption so profound, it was written into flesh and bone. Their immense size was the outward sign of the immense sin that had saturated the world, a world out of balance, crying out for a reckoning that would come as a flood. Before the mountains were shattered, before the oceans were born in cataclysm, there was another world, a world lost to memory, buried beneath millennia of sediment and the silence of a global flood. To understand what came, we must first look back, through the mists of time, to the civilization that was, an earth teeming with life, a humanity in its infancy, yet already walking a path toward a terrifying horizon. To grasp the meaning of the giants who walked the earth, the beings known as the Nephilim, one must first understand the canvas upon which they appeared. It was not a world of innocence, but a world teetering on the brink of utter moral collapse. The ancient scriptures of Genesis offer a stark and chilling diagnosis. They describe a civilization spiraling into a darkness so profound it commanded the attention of heaven itself. This wasn't a gradual decline or a few pockets of corruption. It was a contagion of the soul that had infected the entire human experiment. The text records a divine observation, a summary of the human condition that leaves no room for ambiguity. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Let us pause and consider the weight of those words. Not some inclinations, but every inclination. Not occasionally evil, but only evil. Not sporadically, but all the time. This describes a state of being that is almost impossible for us to conceive. A world without conscience, without empathy, where the very source code of human thought had been rewritten by malice. It suggests a complete surrender to the most base and selfish desires, a society where divine law was not merely disregarded but perhaps entirely forgotten. What does a world look like when every plan, every ambition, every dream is rooted in corruption? The internal corruption of the heart inevitably bled into the external world, staining the very ground with its fruit. The record continues. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. The original Hebrew word used here is Hamas. Today, the word carries specific geopolitical connotations, but in its ancient context, its meaning is far broader and more terrifying. It is not just physical assault. Hamas is injustice, cruelty, exploitation, and oppression in all its forms. It is the strong preying on the weak without restraint. It is a world without a functioning justice system, without sanctuary, where power is the only law and life is cheap. This was a world saturated in a culture of aggression, a global society built on a foundation of pain. Into this maelstrom of wickedness and Hamas, the Nephilim emerge. Were these powerful beings a cause of this decay, tyrannical warlords who accelerated the planet's descent into chaos? Or were they merely a symptom, the ultimate expression of a world that had already embraced the monstrous? Either way, their story is inextricably woven into this narrative of judgment, standing as towering figures in a landscape of profound depravity. This moral decay was comprehensive. It likely signaled the disintegration of the most fundamental social structures, the family, the sanctity of marriage, a breakdown perhaps exemplified or even instigated by the strange union of the sons of God and the daughters of men. Add to this a chilling possibility. The descendants of Cain were noted for their craftsmanship, for developing metallurgy and the arts. In a world with no moral compass, what becomes of technology? Advancements are not channeled into progress, but into power. Craftsmanship is weaponized. The ability to forge bronze and iron is used not to build, but to dominate, to kill, and to inflict suffering on an ever grander scale. Amidst this near-total apostasy, one man stands apart, Noah. The scriptures describe him as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. The starkness of this description reveals the terrifying truth. He was an exception. In a world of billions, righteousness had been reduced to a single family. Their isolation serves as the final, desperate measure of humanity's fall. The last flicker of light in an overwhelming darkness. The human race, created in the image of a benevolent God, had become something else entirely. It had become a creative, intelligent, and technologically advancing civilization dedicated solely to its own destruction. A failed creation whose every thought was a betrayal of its design. The stage was set, the waters were waiting. Before the mountains were sculpted by rain, before history was etched in stone, there was a world teeming with nascent life, a world of promise, breathed into existence by a divine word. But creation is a fragile thing, and humanity, its appointed steward, had become its greatest threat. The earth was no longer a garden of potential, but a theater of corruption, a world where every inclination of the human heart was only evil all the time. This was a world undone by its own inhabitants, a world shadowed by the figures known as the Nephilim, beings of immense power and terrible renown, who filled the earth with a violence that cried out from the very soil. This profound moral decay did not go unnoticed. It did not echo in an empty heaven. Instead, it struck the heart of the Creator, eliciting a response not of cold indifference, but of staggering, intimate pain. The ancient text of Genesis describes it with a language of devastating humanity. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. This is the language of divine grief. It is not the regret of a flawed creator admitting a mistake, but the profound sorrow of a father watching his children embrace self-destruction. It is a sorrow as deep as creation itself, a pain born of perfect love witnessing the perversion of its own good work. How could the image of God stamped upon mankind become so unrecognizable, so marred by its own choices? This divine sorrow was not passive. It was the catalyst for a resolution of terrifying scope. The text continues, a solemn vow from the Creator. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them every creature that moves along the ground, and the birds in the air, for I regret that I have made them. Here, grief coalesces into judgment. The link is direct, the rationale laid bare. The violence and corruption, perhaps epitomized or even driven by the Nephilim, had become a terminal cancer upon the earth. The very fabric of creation entrusted to humanity was now infected by its rebellion. The judgment scale is a testament to the depth of the corruption. It was not to be a localized punishment, but a total cosmic reset. The inclusion of every creature and the birds in the air reveals a critical theological truth. Humanity's sin does not exist in a vacuum. As goes the steward, so goes the creation. The earth itself was groaning under the weight of human evil. This was not merely retribution. It was a necessary cleansing act to preserve the sanctity of the cosmic order. It was a declaration that God would not allow his creation to be permanently defiled, to be completely and irreversibly dragged into humanity's moral abyss. Within this framework, the Nephilim stand as a symbol of ultimate transgression. Whether the offspring of fallen angels or the product of tyrannical human dynasties, their existence represented a profound distortion of God's design, a violation of the sacred boundaries between heaven and earth. Their presence was a living monument to the world's rebellion, making their eradication a crucial component of the divine cleansing. To heal the world, the deepest sources of its sickness had to be removed. But this raises an unavoidable and deeply unsettling question. Can a global annihilation ever be considered just? The sheer scale of the deluge challenges our understanding of divine mercy. Yet the narrative presents this drastic measure as a last resort. It was a response to a world that had become, in its totality, irredeemable. A world where the light was so thoroughly extinguished that only a single flame, in the person of Noah and his family, remained. The judgment, then, was not an act of rage, but a solemn act of preservation. It was the only way to prevent evil from becoming the permanent, uncontested master of the world. And it is here, within the declaration of utter destruction, that an unexpected seed of hope is found. The decision to wipe the slate clean was not an ending, but a violent, necessary prelude to a new beginning. The divine grief that mourned a corrupted world also held a vision for its redemption. For even as the decree went out to destroy all life, God's eyes were already on the one righteous man who would carry the future through the storm. The judgment was absolute. The waters would rise to cover the highest mountains. Yet it was not the final word. In the chronicles of humanity, there is no event more dramatic, no act of judgment more absolute than the Great Flood. It is a story etched into the bedrock of memory, a cataclysm that scoured the face of the earth. But this was no random disaster. The scriptures of Genesis, from chapters 6 through 9, paint a picture of a world that had become a masterpiece of corruption, a world groaning under the weight of its own wickedness. Humanity's violence had filled the earth, and an unnatural element had taken root. The Nephilim, the mighty ones of old, whose very existence was a violation of the created order. The world God had called good was now irrevocably tainted. A reset was required, a cleansing. The divine solution was as terrifying as it was total. A deluge of water to unmake the world, to wash away the stain of an age gone wrong. But amidst the pronouncement of universal judgment, a sliver of grace remained. One man, Noah, found favor in the eyes of God. He was deemed righteous, a singular point of light in an era of profound darkness. To him was given a monumental task, an instruction of divine engineering, to build an ark. It was to be a vessel of salvation, a fortress against the coming wrath. 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high, fashioned from gopher wood and sealed with pitch, inside and out. It was not merely a boat, it was a floating covenant designed to preserve a remnant of life, Noah's family and pairs of every creature that walked, crawled, and flew. A genetic bottleneck for the future of all life on Earth. Then, the appointed day came. The scriptures describe the cataclysm with a terrifying precision. It was not just a storm, it was a deconstruction of the world itself. On that very day, Genesis recounts, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. The planet's two great reservoirs of water, those above the sky and those below the earth, were unleashed simultaneously, a pincer movement of cosmic scale. For 40 days and 40 nights the rain fell, relentless and unceasing. But below, the very foundations of the world ruptured, disgorging subterranean oceans. The water rose, swallowing landmarks, erasing coastlines, climbing the highest peaks until the entire globe was submerged in a silent, churning sea. The purpose of this overwhelming force was eradication. The text is unambiguous. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth and all mankind. Every man, every woman, every child outside the ark was lost. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Crucially, this was the definitive end for the antediluvian Nephilim. Whether their physical forms were drowned in the deluge or their illicit lineage was simply and finally severed, the flood was the mechanism that ensured their complete removal. It was not simply punishment, it was a necessary surgery. A divine intervention to excise a corruption so cancerous it threatened to consume all of creation and derail God's ultimate purpose for humanity. Was this the only way to save what was left? Yet floating upon this endless ocean of judgment was the ark, a testament to both God's justice and his mercy. The preservation of Noah and his family was not an afterthought. It was the entire point. It was a demonstration that even in the face of universal condemnation, righteousness is seen, remembered, and rescued. Noah was to be the new progenitor of the human race, the seed from which a new world would grow. The flood, therefore, becomes more than an event. It becomes a symbol. It is the baptism of the earth itself, a washing away of the old, corrupted order to consecrate a new beginning. While geologists and hydrologists debate the mechanics and scale of such an event, its theological purpose within the biblical narrative is crystal clear. This was a singular moment, a divine act that stands alone in history. The deluge marks the definitive boundary between two worlds, the lawless, chaotic age before and the new era to come after. It was the culmination of God's response to a planet saturated with moral degradation and twisted by an unnatural presence. One chapter of human history was violently closed, its failures submerged beneath the waves. But on that water, a new chapter was already being written, inside a wooden vessel carrying the hope of all future generations, floating toward a world reborn. A world that would be governed by a new and solemn covenant under the watchful sign of a rainbow. In the grand tapestry of ancient stories, few events are as absolute, as final, as the Great Flood. A world submerged, a slate wiped clean. A divine judgment meant to purge corruption, to offer humanity a second, unblemished dawn. The waters receded, a covenant was sealed in the arch of a rainbow, and history was given a chance to begin again. But within this pristine new beginning, a shadow from the old world stubbornly persists, an echo of a monstrous past that refuses to stay buried. The narrative of the flood is one of cleansing, of total eradication. The Nephilim, those enigmatic giants of Genesis, born of a forbidden union between the celestial and the terrestrial, were meant to be washed away with the sins of their age. Yet, centuries later, as a new nation stands at the threshold of a promised land, the terrifying specter of the giants reappears. The account is found in the report of 12 Israelite spies sent to scout the land of Canaan. Their words, preserved in the Book of Numbers, shatter any simple understanding of the flood's finality. They report seeing a land that devours its inhabitants and something more. They claim with chilling certainty, "We saw the Nephilim there." This single verse creates a profound fracture in the timeline, a theological and historical puzzle that has intrigued scholars for millennia. If the deluge was a comprehensive reset, wiping out all life not aboard the ark, how could the Nephilim possibly have returned? Had the cleansing failed? Or was something far more complex unfolding in the story of humanity's second chance? One of the most common attempts to solve this riddle proposes a shift in language. In this view, the term Nephilim had by the time of the spies evolved. It was no longer a precise genetic label for a specific half-divine race, but a terrifying descriptor, a piece of cultural shorthand for any colossal, intimidating warrior. The spies, encountering the towering sons of Anak, reached into the darkest corners of their ancestral memory for a word that could possibly convey their dread. The giants of Canaan were not literal descendants of the pre-flood beings, but men so formidable they earned the same legendary name. Yet, other traditions entertain a more disquieting possibility: a second incursion. This theory suggests the cosmic rebellion described in Genesis was not a singular event. It posits that after the flood, another group of fallen sons of God repeated the transgression, forging new illicit unions and birthing a second generation of giants. While not explicitly stated in the canonical text, this idea of a recurring corruption resonates in extra-biblical writings, painting a picture of a persistent cosmic conflict playing out on the human stage. A third perspective focuses not on the giants, but on the spies themselves. It suggests their report was an act of deliberate, fearful exaggeration. Faced with warriors of formidable stature, their courage failed. To justify their desire to retreat, they invoked the most terrifying name from their ancient lore. By labeling the Canaanites Nephilim, they were not making a biological claim, but a psychological one, transforming a military challenge into a supernatural horror story, an obstacle no mortal could be expected to overcome. As they confessed, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." This was the language of utter demoralization. Here we must draw a careful distinction. The antediluvian Nephilim of Genesis are tied directly to a specific, world-altering origin story. The post-flood giants of Canaan, the Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim, are presented as formidable human adversaries, mighty clans to be conquered. Whatever their ultimate origin, their narrative role is different. They are no longer a symptom of a world spiraling into chaos, but a test of faith for a nation on a divine mission. Their existence in the Promised Land becomes a central challenge in Israel's story, a tangible symbol of the overwhelming odds that could only be surmounted through faith and divine intervention. They are the giants that must be faced, and so the mystery deepens, folding back on itself to the very first mention of these beings. Genesis chapter 6 declares the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and then adds a cryptic, almost casual clause, "and also afterward." For centuries, that phrase has hung in the air, a loose thread in the narrative. Could the giants of Canaan be the fulfillment of that enigmatic clause? A deliberate echo left by the ancient author, reminding us that even after the waters of judgment recede, the shadows of the old world can reappear, and that the greatest tests often take the form of the giants we believe were long since vanquished. In the dust of the ancient world, when myth and memory were woven into a single fabric, legends walked the earth. They were not ghosts or ethereal spirits, but beings of flesh and bone whose very scale defied the human imagination. Long before the rise of empires, before chronicles were kept in ink and papyrus, their story was etched in the bedrock of the Near East, a story of giants. And as the tribes of Israel, forged in the crucible of Egypt, turned their eyes toward a promised land, they would find that these legends were not consigned to the past. They were waiting. Out of the unfolding narrative of the Exodus, a name begins to surface in the whispers of scouts and the warnings of kings. It is a name heavy with dread, a term that becomes synonymous with primordial power and towering strength, the Rephaim. They are the formidable inhabitants of Canaan, a recurring and terrifying obstacle in the path of God's people. Not merely a single tribe, the Rephaim appear as a vast and ancient confederation of giants, a shadow stretching across the landscape. Their presence suggests a world far older and more dangerous than the Israelites could have ever conceived. The biblical texts speak of them with a stark clarity, weaving their existence into the very geography of the land. In the book of Deuteronomy, we are told of the territories east of the Jordan, of lands once held by peoples of immense stature. The scripture states, the Emim used to live there, a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakim. They too were considered Rephaim. This single passage is a revelation. It not only confirms their colossal size, linking them to the feared Anakim, but it establishes the Rephaim as a distinct, overarching category of giant. Their dominion was so absolute that entire regions like the fertile plains of Bashan became known simply as the land of the Rephaim, a testament to their deep-rooted and fearsome sovereignty. Imagine the reports carried back to the Israelite camp. They were not just tales of fortified cities or disciplined armies. They were accounts of men who stood like towers, whose strength was legendary. This was a psychological war before the first spear was ever thrown. The Rephaim were a living embodiment of the impossible, their reputation a weapon more potent than bronze or iron. How does a nation of former slaves, armed with faith and a divine promise, stand against an enemy that seems to belong to a more savage and powerful age? Their physical presence would have been a constant, terrifying reminder of the odds, designed to crush the morale and extinguish the hope of any who would dare challenge them. The confrontation was inevitable. Under the leadership of Moses, Israel marches toward Bashan, the heartland of the Rephaim. There they face Og, the king of Bashan, described as the last of these giants in the region. The battle that follows is not just a strategic victory. It is a theological statement. The destruction of Og and his people is presented as a direct act of God, a demonstration that no earthly power, no matter how physically imposing, could stand against his will. The conquest of the Rephaim was the clearing of the path, a profound testament to God's faithfulness in the face of overwhelming fear. It was proof that the promise was greater than the peril. Herein lies their deepest significance. The Rephaim were more than a military obstacle. They were a spiritual crucible. Their existence challenged the Israelites to look beyond the terrifying reality they could see and to trust in the divine power they could not. Overcoming them was a defining moment, forging their identity as a people whose strength came not from their own might, but from their reliance on God's sovereign power. They were a test of faith written in flesh and bone, and their defeat was a cornerstone of Israel's foundational story. Yet, the enigma of the Rephaim deepens as we look beyond the biblical texts. In the unearthed archives of the ancient city of Ugarit, the same word appears, but with a different, more spectral meaning. Here, the Arpam are not living giants, but ancestral spirits, chthonic figures who dwell in the underworld. This adds another layer of mystery to their identity. Were they merely men of great size? Or did their name carry a darker, more ancient resonance, linking them to the very spirits of the dead land they occupied? Ultimately, the Rephaim stand as concrete, post-flood examples of a world still grappling with monstrous realities. They bring the seemingly distant, antediluvian tales of giants into the recorded history of Israel. They demonstrate that the challenge of confronting a formidable, perhaps supernaturally empowered adversary was not lost in the waters of the Great Deluge. For the people of the Covenant, the echoes of giants were very real, a tangible threat that made the power of their God all the more undeniable. Before the trumpets of Joshua, before the armies of a new nation carved their destiny into the stone and soil of Canaan, the land itself held a memory. It was a place of deep history and deeper fears, haunted by the shadow of forgotten empires and inhabited by peoples of formidable renown. The biblical narrative of the conquest is not merely a story of war, but an encounter with the mythic made real, a confrontation with giants. This was a land where legends walked, casting long shadows under the bronze sun. These were not a single monolithic race. They were a pantheon of titans, a diverse collection of clans and kingdoms whose names were whispered with a mixture of awe and terror. Beyond the enigmatic Rephaim, the ancient texts introduce us to a gallery of colossal adversaries. To understand the trial that awaited the Israelites, we must first understand the giants who called this promised land their home. Of all these formidable peoples, none are more prominent than the Anakim. Their name echoes through the early history of Israel as a benchmark for terror. When Moses sent 12 spies to scout the land, their report was colored by the sight of these men. "The people who live there are powerful," they stammered, "and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. In their own eyes, they became as grasshoppers." The Anakim were not just large, they were a civilization. Their power was rooted in a patriarchal lineage traced to a mighty founder, Anak, and their strength was fortified behind the massive walls of cities like Hebron, Debir, and Anab, strategic strongholds that dominated the highlands. They were the undisputed lords of the southern mountains, and their very existence presented a seemingly impossible barrier to the divine promise. But the Anakim were not an isolated phenomenon. As we move across the Jordan River into the territories of Moab and Ammon, the biblical record reveals that the fear of giants was a shared regional experience. The book of Deuteronomy speaks of the Emim, a name given by the Moabites meaning the terrors. The text is explicit in its comparison, describing them as a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakim. They were the old inhabitants, the primordial power that had to be displaced before Moab could claim its inheritance. A mirror image of this history is found just to the north in the land of the Ammonites. Here, the giants were known as the Zamzumin, another people described with the same chilling refrain. A great people and many and tall as the Anakim. The repetition is deliberate and powerful. From the hills of Hebron to the plains of Moab, the land was stalked by beings of extraordinary stature. The Emim and the Zamzumin were not entirely different species, but distinct tribes within a broader, terrifying family. They were different names for the same profound reality: that Canaan and its neighboring lands were in the grip of a giant dynasty, branches of the same ancient and intimidating lineage, a lineage often traced back to the Rephaim themselves. What then does it mean to inherit a world governed by such beings? The constant emphasis on their height and strength serves a vital narrative purpose. It is a literary device meant to magnify the sheer impossibility of the task ahead. The giants are the ultimate physical obstacle. They represent the world's power, the very embodiment of flesh and might set against the unseen power of God. The conquest of Canaan was therefore positioned as a test of faith on an epic scale. How does a nation of former slaves, scarred by generations of bondage, stand against a warrior class so imposing that seasoned scouts lose their nerve? The answer, the text insists, lies not in human strength, but in divine intervention, and so the giants fall. Their displacement is framed as a sovereign act. Deuteronomy recounts how God drove out the Emim for the Moabites and the Zamzumin for the Ammonites, just as he would later clear the Anakim from the path of Israel. Joshua's campaign becomes the final decisive chapter in this saga, a systematic dismantling of the giants' last and greatest strongholds. This wasn't just a human war. It was the closing of an age. It was the fulfillment of a promise that God's power transcends even the most daunting physical adversaries. proving that no fortress is too high and no warrior is too tall for his purpose to be accomplished. The story of this broader giant pantheon, Anakim, Imim, and Zamzumin, cements the idea that the Promised Land was won not by the sword alone, but by a faith that dared to face the titans of the old world and claim a new one. In the ancient world, the boundary between history and myth is often a shadow line, a place where legends walk and memory becomes a monument. For a nation of wanderers emerging from centuries of bondage, the world ahead was filled with terrors both real and imagined. But some fears were not imagined. They were towering physical realities, armed and enthroned. Among the litany of giants said to roam the Promised Land, one name echoes with the chilling weight of iron and stone: Og, the king of Bashan. He was not a fleeting shadow or a whispered story told around a campfire. He was a king, a warrior, the last vestige of a fearsome primordial race, and his encounter with the Israelites would become a defining moment in their sacred history. The biblical text, often spare with physical description, makes a stunning exception for this giant king. It offers a tangible, almost architectural detail, a single object that speaks volumes. The book of Deuteronomy records, "Only Og, king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. His bed was an iron bed, 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide." A cubit, the measure from a man's elbow to the tip of his fingers, gives us a staggering scale. This was a bedstead over 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. It was not merely a place of rest. It was a platform of iron, a throne for a sleeping titan. This artifact, which the text notes was still on display for generations to see, served as irrefutable proof. It invited the listener to imagine the sheer physicality of the man who required it. How could a fledgling nation of former slaves ever hope to stand against a monarch of such epic proportions? Og's colossal size was more than a physical attribute. It was a statement of his lineage. The scriptures identify him as the last of the remnant of the Rephaim, a term for an ancient race of giants who had once dominated the region. This single phrase is a thread connecting the age of Moses directly to a deeper, more mysterious past, confirming that the world-altering flood had not erased these beings from the earth. They persisted, and Og was their final, formidable heir. He ruled over the kingdom of Bashan, a land east of the Jordan renowned for its fertile pastures and mighty oaks. But its true strength lay in its defenses. His domain included 60 fortified cities, strongholds protected by high walls, gates, and bars. This was no primitive tribe led by a large chieftain. It was an established, well-defended power block, a panshur in the path of Israel's destiny. As Moses and the Israelites approached, having already defeated Sihon, another Amorite king, the command from God was direct and absolute. "Do not be afraid of him," the Lord said, "for I have delivered him into your hands, along with his whole army and his land." The ensuing battle was not merely a territorial dispute. It was a confrontation with a living legend. The armies of Israel swept into Bashan, and the result was a complete, divinely ordained victory. They struck down King Og, his sons, and all his people until no survivor was left. They toppled a giant and dismantled his impenetrable kingdom piece by stone piece. The victory was a thunderclap, a seismic event that sent tremors of both fear and hope across the land. For the people of Israel, this was more than a military conquest. It was a profound spiritual confirmation. To stand before 60 fortified cities and a king of mythic stature was the ultimate test of their faith. To see them fall was to see God's promise made manifest in the most undeniable way. It galvanized their morale, transforming doubt into resolve. If God could deliver a walking mountain like Og into their hands, what other enemy could possibly stand in their way? The conquest of Bashan also had immense strategic value. This lush, well-watered territory became their first major land acquisition, a secure foothold from which they could prepare for the greater conquest of Canaan itself. It was a tangible down payment on the promise God had made to their ancestors. The legacy of King Og is therefore twofold. He is remembered as the adversary, the embodiment of the overwhelming physical forces that stood against God's people. But his defeat is remembered as the ultimate testament to a power far greater than flesh and bone. The story of his downfall and the enduring image of his massive iron bed became a cornerstone of Israelite memory. It was a constant reminder that their journey was guided not just by spiritual hope, but by a divine force capable of intervening in the world, of shattering armies, and of toppling giants. King Og of Bashan was a monument of a man, but in his defeat, he became an even greater monument to the faith that overcame him. In the memory of humankind, there are stories that refuse to become mere history. They breathe, they resonate across the ages, their characters stepping out of the ancient dust to become archetypes. Upon the stage of the Valley of Elah, where two armies once faced each other in a stalemate of steel and fear, one such story was forged. A narrative that would forever define the struggle between overwhelming power and improbable faith. Centuries had passed since the first wars for Canaan, yet the land still harbored its ancient terrors. From the Philistine city of Gath, a champion emerged, a figure who seemed less a man and more a walking embodiment of war itself. His name was Goliath. The ancient texts paint his portrait with meticulous, fearsome detail. A helmet of bronze shielded his head. A coat of scale armor, weighing over 125 pounds, encased his torso. Bronze greaves protected his legs, and a bronze javelin was slung between his shoulders. His spear was a weapon of legend, its shaft like a weaver's rod, tipped with an iron point that weighed 15 pounds alone. Even his shield required a dedicated bearer to carry it before him. But it was his stature that defied belief. The record states he stood 6 cubits and a span, a measure that translates to nearly 10 feet tall. This was no mere large man. This was a true giant, a living echo of the feared Anakim, a testament to the enduring presence of colossal bloodlines in the contested hills of Judea. He was the culmination of everything the Israelites had been taught to fear, a physical manifestation of an ancient and persistent threat. What chance did a common soldier have against a fortress of a man? For 40 days, this monolith of flesh and metal strode into the valley between the camps. His challenge was a custom of ancient warfare, single combat. Let one man from each side decide the fate of all. But this was more than tradition. It was psychological warfare of the highest order. His voice, a thunderous taunt against the armies of Israel and a blasphemy against their God, echoed across the valley each morning and each evening. The effect was absolute. A paralysis of terror gripped the Israelite forces. Their finest warriors, men of renown and valor, were reduced to silent spectators. Even their king, Saul, himself a man of great height and military prowess, was frozen by the sheer, perceived invincibility of the Philistine champion. The giant was not just a military problem. He had become a crisis of faith. Into this theater of fear walked a shepherd boy, sent to the front lines only to bring food to his brothers. His name was David. He was too young to be a soldier, armed with nothing but a staff and a sling. Yet where seasoned warriors saw an unstoppable foe, David saw an uncircumcised Philistine defying the armies of the living God. His decision to face the giant was not born of youthful arrogance or a fool's bravado. It was an act of profound and searing faith, an indignation that a creature of flesh and blood would dare to mock the divine power that had delivered his people time and again. Here the core of the conflict is laid bare. It is not merely a contest between two men, but between two worldviews. Goliath places his trust in the visible, the tangible, the weight of his bronze, the sharpness of his iron, the power in his limbs. David, in stark contrast, discards the king's own armor as unfamiliar and cumbersome. He approaches the battlefield with 5 smooth stones from a stream and the simple sling he used to protect his flock. His faith was in the unseen. His pre-battle declaration was not a boast, but a theological manifesto. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin," he cried, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied." It was a declaration of spiritual war. The outcome is etched into the consciousness of the world. A single stone, slung with shepherd's skill but guided by divine purpose, struck the giant on the forehead. The seemingly invincible champion, the great Goliath of Gath, fell face down on the earth. His defeat at the hands of a boy with a stone was a thunderous statement from the heavens. that deliverance is not found in the strength of a horse or the might of a man, but in those who place their trust in God. The legacy of that moment has far outlived the Philistine Empire. David and Goliath are no longer just historical figures. They are an eternal metaphor for the courage that confronts tyranny, for the faith that overcomes fear, and for the profound truth that the scale of a challenge is never the final measure of its outcome. Goliath of Gath was cemented in history not for his strength, but for his fall. The archetypal giant, forever destined to be defeated. In the ancient memory of humanity, some figures cast a shadow longer than others. They are titans, behemoths, giants of myth and scripture whose names echo with the clang of impossible armor and the tremor of earth-shaking steps. We remember Goliath, the champion of Gath, a walking mountain of bronze and muscle felled by a shepherd's stone. We recall Og, king of Bashan, the last of his kind, whose immense iron bed became a testament to a vanquished age. These are the headline acts, the giants who command the central stage of biblical history. But they are not alone. Woven into the fabric of the scriptural record, scattered across chronicles and kingly histories, are other mentions. Sporadic, often brief, yet collectively, they paint a startling picture. The presence of giants was not a fleeting anomaly, but an enduring, persistent threat throughout the history of ancient Israel. These are not fables confined to a distant mythic past. They are the recurring adversaries faced by kings and warriors, a formidable feature of the physical and spiritual landscape that God's people were commanded to conquer and possess. What happens when we gather these scattered threads and see the tapestry they form? The most vivid accounts emerge from the era of Israel's greatest king, David. Long after his legendary victory in the Valley of Elah, the threat of giants rose again, proving that Goliath was not a solitary monster, but a member of a fearsome warrior caste. The second book of Samuel and the first book of Chronicles serve as our field reports, detailing a series of brutal life-or-death encounters. During a fierce battle with the Philistines, the aging King David grew weary, and a new champion of Gath saw his chance. His name was Ishbi-Benob, a descendant of the ancient giants, the Rapha. He wielded a bronze spear of staggering weight, 300 shekels, a weapon few ordinary men could even lift. He cornered the exhausted king, his spear poised for a death blow that would have changed the course of history. But in that critical moment, David's nephew, the hero Abishai, charged in, striking the giant down and saving the king. The message was clear. The age of giants was not over. The chronicles continue the bloody tally. In another battle, a warrior named Saph, also of the giant brood of Gath, was cut down by Sibbecai the Hushathite. And then there is the most peculiar, most detailed description of all. A third confrontation involved a man of great stature, a giant whose very biology seemed to defy the norm. The text carefully notes a startling physical trait. He possessed 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 digits in total. This bizarre detail, often interpreted as a possible genetic marker for a specific giant lineage, made him a terrifying spectacle. He taunted Israel, much as Goliath had done a generation before. But another of David's nephews, Jonathan, met his challenge and defeated him. These are not mere footnotes to history. They are stark reminders that the conquest of Canaan and the establishment of the kingdom did not magically erase every monstrous threat. The struggle continued, demanding a new generation of heroes and a constant reliance on divine strength. These incidental mentions serve a profound purpose. They normalize the existence of giants within the biblical worldview. They transform them from isolated fairy tale villains into a recurring military problem. The text is methodical, often tracing their lineage back to the Rapha in Gath, reinforcing their connection to the primeval Rephaim, a continuous, though perhaps dwindling line of extraordinary beings. Their heavy weaponry and immense physical power are consistently emphasized, making every victory against them not just a military triumph, but a testament to a power greater than flesh and bone. Each giant that falls is a demonstration of God's sovereignty over the seemingly insurmountable forces of the world. By cataloging these forgotten giants, a fuller story emerges. It is a story of a people forged in constant struggle, a people whose faith was tested not once by a single giant, but time and again by the enduring presence of a race that refused to fade into legend. In the spare, ancient verses of the Hebrew Bible, there is a whisper of cosmic rebellion. A brief, cryptic account in the book of Genesis speaks of a time when the sons of God came down to the daughters of men, and from their union, giants were born. These were the Nephilim, the mighty men of old. The story is told in a handful of lines, a stark and unsettling fragment that has haunted theologians and mystics for millennia. It is an echo of a much larger story, a shadow cast by an unseen fire. But what if the full blaze of that story was not lost but merely hidden? Beyond the canon, in the margins of Scripture, lies another text, a book of staggering vision and breathtaking detail, known as the Book of Enoch. While the Bible offers a glimpse, Enoch provides a sprawling panorama. It is a work of apocalyptic grandeur that dares to fill in the silences, to paint a vivid and terrifying portrait of this pre-Diluvian world. To understand the Nephilim, we must turn to this shadow text, for it contains the most complete and influential account of their origin ever written. This is the story not just of a transgression, but of a cosmic conspiracy that would scar creation itself. According to Enoch, the sons of God were not nebulous beings, but a specific, high-ranking order of angels known as the Watchers. 200 of them, a legion of celestial guardians, stood at their post, observing humanity. But observation curdled into desire. Led by their chiefs, Semjaza and Azazel, they looked upon human women and were consumed by lust. On the slopes of Mount Hermon, a place whose very name means curse, they gathered and swore a binding oath, sealing a pact of mutual damnation. They would descend together, defy their creator, and take what was not theirs. This descent was a twofold poison. First, the illicit unions. The Watchers took human wives, a mingling of divine and mortal that tore the fabric of nature. From these forbidden embraces, a monstrous progeny was born, the giants, the Nephilim. Described as 3,000 cubits tall, they were beings of impossible scale and voracious, unnatural hunger. But the Watchers' sin did not end with their lust. They brought with them forbidden knowledge, secrets of heaven that humanity was never meant to possess. Azazel taught the art of metallurgy, the forging of swords, knives, and shields. Semjaza taught incantations and root cuttings. Others revealed the secrets of astrology, sorcery, and the cosmetic arts of seduction. They armed humanity for war and adorned it for vanity, accelerating a moral decay that bled across the world. The children of this corruption, the Nephilim, became the agents of chaos. Their insatiable appetites were a plague upon the earth. At first, they consumed all the toil of men, the grains, the fruits, the livestock. When that was not enough, they turned on the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. And when all life began to dwindle before their hunger, they turned on each other, and finally, on humanity itself. The world became their banquet and mankind their prey. The violence that Genesis says filled the earth finds its terrifying source in Enoch's narrative. The cannibalistic rampage of these demigod giants, a direct consequence of their father's rebellion. How could creation possibly survive such an onslaught? Enoch's account presents a profound theological shift. Here, the primary source of pervasive, world-ending evil is not solely human weakness, but an external, celestial corruption. It is a cosmic fall, an angelic sin that infects the human realm with knowledge and violence it was not prepared for. The judgment for this crime is as epic as the transgression itself. The rebellious Watchers are captured, bound in chains, and cast into utter darkness, imprisoned within the earth to await the final day of judgment. Their giant offspring, the Nephilim, are turned against one another in a suicidal war until they are all annihilated. But their end is not truly an end. From their dying bodies, their spirits are released, restless, disembodied, and malevolent. According to Enoch, these became the demons, the evil spirits destined to plague humanity until the end of time. Though it was ultimately excluded from most biblical canons, the Book of Enoch was no obscure text in the ancient world. It was immensely popular in early Judaism, profoundly shaping the worldview of communities like the Essenes, who preserved copies of it among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Its influence saturates early Christian thought, quoted directly in the New Testament's Epistle of Jude and clearly alluded to in the second Epistle of Peter. It provided the imagery, the vocabulary, and the theological framework for understanding the unseen war between good and evil. To ignore Enoch is to read the story of the Nephilim with a chapter missing. It is the key that unlocks the cryptic verses of Genesis, revealing a world not just of human failing, but of divine betrayal, monstrous consequence, and a shadow that still lingers. In the spare, enigmatic verses of Genesis, a shadow falls across the early history of mankind. It tells of a time when the sons of God saw the daughters of men, and from their union, giants were born upon the earth. For millennia, these lines remained a cryptic whisper, a fragment of a story lost to time. But there exists another account, an ancient text of breathtaking detail and terrible clarity that claims to tell the full story. This is the world as seen through the eyes of Enoch, the seventh patriarch from Adam. The Book of Enoch does not speak of a few wayward celestial beings. It gives a number and a name to the catastrophe. 200 angels, a class of celestial guardians known as the Watchers, stood at the ramparts of heaven, tasked with observing humanity. But their observation soured into obsession. Led by an archon named Semjaza, their gaze fell upon the daughters of men, and a corrupting desire was kindled in their immortal hearts. They conspired, making a pact born of lust and rebellion. On the slopes of Mount Hermon, a peak whose name means curse, they bound themselves by a mutual oath to descend together, to take wives from humanity, and to share equally in the sin and its inevitable punishment. This was no impulsive act. It was a premeditated coup against the divine order. Their descent was an act of cosmic severance. They forsook their heavenly dwelling, their forms of light and spirit, and took on a physical presence on earth. The sacred boundary between the celestial and the terrestrial was shattered. From the unholy union of angel and human, a new race was born, the Nephilim. In Enoch's telling, these were not merely men of renown. They were great giants, whose height was 3,000 cubits, beings of impossible scale with appetites to match. They consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when the food ran out, they turned on humanity itself, devouring, sinning, and shedding blood. They were a fundamental violation of creation, a living testament to the corruption of two worlds. But was this biological horror the extent of their sin? The Watchers' greatest transgression was not merely of the flesh, but of the mind. They became purveyors of forbidden knowledge, secrets that humanity was never meant to possess. A Watcher named Azazel is singled out for a terrible distinction. He taught humanity the art of mythology, not for progress, but for destruction. He showed them how to forge swords, to make knives, shields, and breastplates. In a world of divine simplicity, Azazel introduced the science of warfare, but the corruption spread through every facet of human life. Other Watchers taught enchantments and root cuttings, the arts of sorcery. They revealed the secrets of astrology, the motions of the moon, the signs of the sun, teaching humanity to seek guidance in the stars rather than from their creator. Even vanity became a tool of ruin as they taught the making of bracelets and ornaments, the use of antimony for beautifying the eyelids, and the nature of precious stones. This was not enlightenment. It was a poisoning of the soul. Each piece of forbidden wisdom was a step away from God, a step towards pride, violence, and a reliance on illicit power. The result was a world spiraling into darkness. Enoch's words are stark. And much godlessness was committed, and they committed fornication, and they went astray, and all their ways became corrupt. The brief mention of wickedness in Genesis is here given its terrible source code. It was a corruption instigated from beyond the veil, a cosmic rebellion that had trapped humanity in its wake. The world was broken, not just by human choice, but by a profound betrayal from its celestial guardians. As the giants consumed the earth, and the teachings of the Watchers bled into every corner of civilization, a cry went up from the ravaged planet. The blood of the slain, the souls of the corrupted cried out to the gates of heaven. It was a desperate plea for intervention, an appeal to the divine justice that seemed so distant. The heavens heard, and in response to this world, now drowned in violence and defiled by forbidden arts, a judgment was prepared. A cleansing fire was to be replaced by a cleansing water. The age of the Nephilim was coming to an end, and a sentence was about to be passed upon the watchers who had abandoned their first estate. In the quiet spaces between the familiar verses of Scripture lies a shadow history, a story too vast, too strange for the canon, yet one that haunted the imagination of the ancient world. It is a story preserved not in Genesis, but in the forbidden pages of the Book of Enoch. Here, the cryptic reference to beings called the Nephilim explodes into a terrifying, detailed saga, a narrative of their origin, their reign, and their truly horrifying end. While the Bible offers a haunting whisper, Enoch provides the thunderous testimony. It details not only how the Nephilim were born from the union of fallen angels and human women, but paints a vivid portrait of what they became. They were, in the words of Enoch, great giants, whose height was 3,000 cubits. While scholars debate this staggering figure, whether it is a literal measure or ascribes hyperbole, the message is brutally clear. These were not merely large men. They were beings of an impossible, unnatural scale. Titans who would have viewed our own mountains as foothills, their very presence a violation of the created order. They were walking calamities, terrifying figures whose shadows fell like an eclipse over the sun. But their monstrous size was matched by a monstrous appetite. Enoch describes a world straining to feed its new masters, and they devoured all the toil of men. The text reveals a chilling account of a parasitic existence. The giants consumed every crop, every herd, every resource the earth could offer. When the planet's bounty was exhausted and humanity itself could no longer sustain them, the narrative takes its darkest turn. The giants turned against them and devoured mankind. This was not simply conquest, it was consumption. A world being eaten alive by its own unnatural offspring. A chilling testament to the consequences of forbidden knowledge and forbidden unions. Their inherent nature was violence. This constant predation, this lawless consumption, bled into the very fabric of the age. They filled the antediluvian world with the profound corruption the Hebrews called Hamas, a deep-seated violence and lawlessness that saturated the land. Prey upon humanity, and likely upon each other, their destructive urges knew no bounds. From this tormented earth a cry arose, the collective anguish of a species on the brink of extinction, an appeal from a world groaning under the weight of angelic rebellion and the crushing heel of their progeny. This cry pierced the heavens, reaching the throne of the Most High and sealing the fate of the world. The divine answer was absolute, a cleansing deluge. The great flood was decreed not only to wash away human sin, but to purge the earth of this hybrid contagion. The waters rose, and the colossal bodies of the Nephilim fell. Their reign of flesh and bone was over. But while the waters cleansed the earth of their physical forms, a far more insidious question remained. What became of their immortal spirits? Here, the Book of Enoch presents its most profound and disturbing revelation. The death of a Nephilim was not an end. It was a transformation. Their physical bodies, born of mortal women, were destroyed, but their spirits, born of immortal angels, could not be. Trapped between realms, unhoused and filled with the malice of their fathers, they were cursed to wander the earth. Enoch 15 gives this curse a name and a function. Now the giants, who are produced from spirit and flesh, shall be called evil spirits upon the earth. Evil spirits have proceeded from their bodies. Because they are born from men and from the holy watchers is their beginning and primary origin. They shall be evil spirits on earth, and spirits of the wicked shall they be called. This is a theological earthquake. In this ancient text, we find a detailed birth certificate for what we have come to call demons. They are not a second band of fallen angels, but the disembodied, malignant ghosts of the Nephilim. It is a direct and unbroken chain of evil, stretching from the initial angelic sin to the post-flood world. The legacy of the giants was not buried in the silt of the flood. It became an invisible spiritual plague. Their torment continues, their insatiable hunger now a hunger for human suffering, their ancient violence now the subtle poison of temptation and despair. They perpetuate the cosmic rebellion of their fathers, the Watchers, ensuring the conflict never truly ends. How many of the evils we face, the whispers of darkness we hear, could be the echoes of their ancient voices? Enoch's comprehensive vision provides a robust, if unsettling, framework for the origin of evil. It is a story of profound consequence, where one act of rebellion unleashes a lineage of shadow, a plague of spirits that haunts humanity to this day. It is a narrative that would ripple through time, shaping the very language of apocalypse and our understanding of the unending war between darkness and light. In the shadows of the accepted canon, buried by time and theological decree, lie other gospels, other histories. These are the apocryphal echoes, whispers from a world where the veil between heaven and earth was perilously thin. Long before the biblical texts were sealed, a constellation of stories orbited the central narrative, expanding upon its mysteries and giving voice to its silences. The story of the Nephilim, those enigmatic giants of Genesis, was not a footnote in this world. It was an epicenter, a cataclysmic event whose shockwaves rippled through the theological imagination of ancient Judaism. Beyond the stark visions of the Book of Enoch, we find these echoes resonating with profound clarity in other works. Chief among them is the Book of Jubilees, a meticulous and expansive retelling of Genesis, sometimes called the Little Genesis. Here, the ambiguity of the canonical account is stripped away. The narrative aligns with the Enochic tradition, leaving no room for doubt. It states plainly that the agents of corruption were not mortal men, but celestial beings. As Jubilees recounts, "And it came to pass, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them, that they were beautiful to look upon. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose, and there was born unto them giants." This text does more than simply name the fathers of the Nephilim. It reinforces the theological crime. Jubilees emphasizes that these watchers did not just sin through lust. They sinned by sharing forbidden knowledge, by teaching humanity the arts of war, enchantment, and vanity. The ensuing violence and depravity were not a mere human failing, but a direct consequence of this angelic transgression. The Great Flood in this telling becomes an act of cosmic cleansing, a necessary and divine response to a world irredeemably tainted by a hybrid blight. But the echoes do not stop there. In the mid-20th century, from the dry, silent caves of Qumran, a lost library was unearthed. The Dead Sea Scrolls revealed that the fascination with the Nephilim was not confined to a single tradition, but was a living, breathing part of the spiritual discourse among various Jewish sects. Texts like the Genesis Apocryphon retold the story with new details, while another, fragmented but vital work, offered a stunning shift in perspective: the Book of Giants. For the first time, the narrative lens turns from the heavens to the earth, from the sin of the fathers to the fate of their children. The Book of Giants grants the Nephilim a voice. We see them not as monolithic monsters, but as conflicted beings haunted by their own nature. We witness their terrifying dreams, premonitions of the watery doom that awaits them. In these fragments, the giants are gripped by fear, their immense strength rendered meaningless by the dawning realization of their own mortality and impending judgment. They are no longer just perpetrators of violence. They are figures in a tragedy of their own making, appealing desperately to the prophet Enoch to intercede on their behalf with the very authority their fathers defied. This adds a startling layer of complexity to their characterization. Were they purely monstrous, or were they tragic figures, born of a celestial crime they did not commit, yet destined to pay its price? These texts suggest a reality far more nuanced than simple good versus evil. They solidify the angelic interpretation of the sons of God, providing a detailed and internally consistent alternative to the cryptic verses of Genesis. Across these writings, a shared conceptual framework emerges, built on recurring themes: a rebellion in heaven, the birth of a powerful hybrid race, the corruption of humanity through forbidden secrets, and the final terrible judgment that would wash the world clean, leaving behind only a legacy of demonic spirits. This symphony of apocryphal voices reveals just how deeply the Nephilim narrative resonated within the worldview of Second Temple Judaism. These works are not scripture, but they are something equally precious: an invaluable window into the soul of an ancient world. They are the evidence of a people wrestling with the most profound questions of existence, the origins of evil, the nature of sin, and the terrifying possibility that the greatest threats to humanity might come not from below, but from the heavens above. In the scant verses of an ancient text, a story is told that has haunted the human imagination for millennia. It speaks of a time before the Great Flood, when divine beings descended to earth and consorted with mortals. From these unions, a new race was born, the Nephilim, mighty, colossal figures of renown, whose very existence blurred the sacred boundary between heaven and earth. Their story seems singular, an anomaly of sacred history, but it is not. This account of primordial chaos and hybrid beings is a whisper in a chorus, a theme that echoes with surprising clarity across the mythologies of the entire ancient Near East. We now embark on a careful exploration, not to conflate these distinct traditions or claim a single origin, but to listen for the resonance between them. We will trace the conceptual threads that weave a shared tapestry of myth, connecting the hills of Canaan to the floodplains of Mesopotamia and the shores of the Aegean. It is a journey into a world grappling with the same profound questions about power, order, and the perilous space where humanity and divinity intersect. In the sun-scorched plains of ancient Sumer, we find the epic of Gilgamesh. The hero king of Uruk is not merely human. He is explicitly described as 2/3 god and 1/3 man, a demigod whose superhuman strength and restless spirit drive him to challenge monsters and defy death itself. His very nature embodies the ancient world's deep fascination with hybridity, the idea that a being could contain within them both the ephemeral substance of humanity and the eternal fire of the gods. Gilgamesh's world is a landscape populated by extraordinary beings, where a person's might is a direct reflection of their proximity to the divine. This theme of potent pre-human forces is carved even deeper into the Babylonian creation myths. In the Enuma Elish, the universe does not begin in quiet serenity, but in a swirling, violent chaos. From this primordial abyss, monstrous beings emerge, primeval deities who must be conquered by younger gods to establish cosmic order. This is not a tale of moral failure, but of a cosmic battle for control, a narrative where powerful, non-human entities represent a fundamental threat to the stability of creation itself, a theme that reverberates in stories of giants and disruptive demigods. Traveling west, to the great port city of Ugarit, we uncover texts that speak of the Rupamei, a word often translated as the Rephaim. These are enigmatic figures, sometimes depicted as the shades of deified kings, sometimes as semi-divine ancestral spirits dwelling in the underworld. They are formidable beings who exist in the liminal space between life and death, the human and the divine. Their very presence a reminder that the world of mortals was once touched by beings of a far greater and perhaps more terrifying power. Across the sea, Greek mythology dramatizes this conflict on an epic scale. Here we find not one, but entire races of primeval beings who challenge the established order. The Titans, the one-eyed Cyclops, the hundred-handed Hecatoncheires, and most vividly the Gigantes, the giants born of the earth itself. The great war between the Olympian gods and these giants, the Gigantomachy, is a foundational myth. It is the ultimate story of divine authority, imposing order upon the raw, chaotic, and terrifying power of the earthbound. Even in Egypt, tales of gods intervening in human affairs, siring powerful offspring, and battling monstrous forces were a part of the cultural air they breathed. Looking at these stories together, a pattern emerges, a set of shared motifs that transcend language and empire. First, the transgression of boundaries, divine beings crossing into the mortal realm. Second, the emergence of colossal or monstrous offspring, beings of immense power who disrupt the natural order. And finally, a necessary and often violent response from the heavens. A divine or heroic effort to defeat these chaotic elements and restore cosmic balance. Yet, this is where the biblical narrative, for all its shared motifs, charts its own unique course. These parallels do not diminish its claims. They illuminate them. While the surrounding cultures told tales of polytheistic power struggles and cosmic turf wars, The story of the Nephilim is framed within a strictly monotheistic worldview. Their existence is not a mere cosmic inconvenience. It is a profound moral and spiritual violation of God's created order. The subsequent judgment is not about one pantheon defeating another, but about the sovereign creator's response to sin and the corruption of his design. By understanding this wider context, we gain a richer appreciation for the world in which this story was first told. The idea of powerful, semi-divine beings was not alien. It was a pervasive feature of the ancient imagination. The biblical authors engaged with these powerful, universal themes, but repurposed them to deliver a distinct theological message. One focused on divine justice, human responsibility, and the sacredness of a world created with intention and order. The echoes of myth only serve to amplify the unique voice of the biblical text. In the shadowed corners of primordial history, nestled between the creation of humanity and its near-total destruction, lie a few cryptic verses. They speak of a time when the world was not only wicked, but fundamentally broken. A time of giants, of heroes of old, of an unholy union that scarred the fabric of reality. This is the narrative of the Nephilim, and regardless of how one interprets these ancient words, they echo with profound and far-reaching theological implications. They force us to confront the deepest questions of our existence, the nature of good and evil, the sanctity of divine order, and the very character of God in his meticulously crafted universe. The first and most jarring implication is the radical corruption of creation itself. The world, as designed, was a symphony of order, a tapestry of distinct kinds and purposes woven together by a divine hand. Humanity was humanity, animals were animals, and the celestial realm had its own distinct nature. The Nephilim, whether seen as angelic human hybrids or the monstrous progeny of human tyranny, represent a violent tearing of that tapestry. They are an unnatural deviation, a dissonant chord in the song of creation. Their very existence is an act of ontological trespass, a blurring of the sacred boundaries that God had established, a profound distortion of his good and perfect design. They are a monument to the idea that the created world could not only be misused but unmade. This story forces us to ask, where did such a profound corruption originate? Was it merely the inevitable result of human sin spiraling out of control, or was something else at play? The narrative suggests that the rot was deeper, its source more ancient. It points to a rebellion that was not confined to the human heart, but one that may have ignited in the heavens themselves. If the sons of God were indeed celestial beings, then this was a cosmic mutiny, a fall before the flood, where spiritual beings actively chose to defy God's law and inject a potent, alien malevolence directly into the human sphere. The ripple effects of their transgression were catastrophic, proving that sin is a force of cosmic significance, capable of spreading like a contagion across the boundaries of creation. And how does a perfectly holy God respond to such a fundamental violation? The answer is as terrifying as it is absolute, with a flood that scours the world clean. This act of divine judgment is not merely punishment. It is a painful world-breaking surgery. It demonstrates God's unwavering commitment to his own righteousness, his refusal to allow evil to permanently defile his creation. He would rather decreate and begin anew than allow such a profound perversion of his order to stand. It is a sobering portrait of divine justice, revealing a patience that, while vast, is not infinite. What does it tell us about the Creator? That he would pay the immense cost of washing his own world away to purge an evil that had taken root so deeply. Yet even in a narrative of cosmic interference, human responsibility remains unshakable. The account is not of a passive humanity, helplessly victimized. The daughters of men actively participated in these unions. The societies they built allowed the violence and wickedness of their powerful offspring to proliferate, filling the earth with corruption. The story is a masterclass in the interplay between external temptation and internal moral failure. It suggests that the most potent forms of evil arise not from a single source, but from a terrible synergy, when a malevolent offer from without finds a willing reception in the darkness of the human heart. In this light, the story of the Nephilim becomes a stark reminder of the unique, precious, and vulnerable nature of humanity. As the sole bearers of God's image on earth, we were the target. The corruption of our bloodline, the perversion of our nature, was an attack on God himself. This ancient account provides a profound context for the spiritual battle that pervades all of biblical theology. It illustrates that humanity is not contending merely with its own fallen nature, but with powerful, unseen forces that actively seek to subvert God's purposes, to mar his image, and to drag his beloved creation back into chaos. Ultimately, the theological landscape revealed by the Nephilim is one of immense stakes and cosmic drama. It is a universe where divine order, though beautiful, can be profoundly disrupted, where sin is not a minor infraction, but a cosmic poison with devastating consequences. And yet it is also a universe governed by a God who is utterly sovereign, a God who in his holiness and justice will not stand idly by. He is a God who intervenes, who cleanses, who restores, and who, in the face of absolute corruption, holds the unwavering power to make all things new. Beneath the skin of the world, behind the veil of recorded history, a battle rages. It is a silent, ancient conflict, a war fought not with iron but with influence, not for land, but for the soul of humanity itself. This is the story of spiritual warfare, a cosmic struggle between light and darkness. And its opening chapter is one of the most enigmatic and unsettling narratives ever recorded, the story of the Nephilim. When read through this lens, the strange account in the book of Genesis is no longer a historical curiosity. It becomes a critical dispatch from the front lines of this unseen war. It details not a random transgression, but a calculated strategic incursion of evil into the human realm. The narrative describes celestial beings, the sons of God, abandoning their heavenly station. They descended to earth, and in an act of profound rebellion, they mingled with humanity, taking human wives. This was more than a fall from grace. It was an act of cosmic treason, a direct challenge to the Creator's established order. It was a strategic attack by fallen spiritual powers aimed at the very heart of God's plan for creation. Their goal was terrifying in its ambition, to corrupt the human lineage, to mar the divine image stamped upon mankind, and to sow a seed of chaos so deep it would make redemption impossible. The battle for humanity, it seems, was not to be confined to whispers of temptation in a garden. It had escalated into an open assault, with cosmic forces actively working to unmake what God had made. And from this unholy union, a new form of life was born. The Nephilim. Their name resonates with power and dread. They were the hybrid offspring, the literal physical embodiment of this spiritual corruption. They were beings of immense strength and legendary stature, but their might was not a gift. It was a symptom of the spiritual malignancy that spawned them. They were instruments of lawlessness, living symbols of the cosmic rebellion that brought them into being. Their violent nature, described in ancient sources by the Hebrew word Hamas, became a contagion. They filled the earth with oppression and bloodshed, accelerating humanity's own descent into moral decay and pulling the world toward a precipice of divine judgment. But what happens when such a being, a creature of mixed nature, finally dies? Does its spiritual malignancy simply vanish? Extra-biblical traditions, most notably the Book of Enoch, provide a chilling answer. They claim the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim found no rest. Instead, they were unleashed upon the world, a plague of invisible, tormenting forces. In this framework, the story of the Nephilim becomes a terrifying origin story for the demonic spirits that would haunt humanity for the remainder of its history. The initial incursion never truly ended. It merely changed its form. This concept of entrenched spiritual opposition became a terrifying reality for later generations. The giant clans the Israelites encountered in the land of Canaan, the Anakim, the Rephaim, were seen by many as the lingering remnants of this ancient corruption, physical and spiritual strongholds of evil that had to be overcome not just with human strength, but with divine power. The war had left its scars upon the very landscape. It is in this context that the Great Flood is redefined. It becomes more than a judgment on human sin. It is a decisive act in a spiritual war. It is God's divine counter-offensive, a radical cleansing of a world drowning not only in water, but in a supernatural venom. The flood was a reclamation, a scouring of the earth to purge the genetic and spiritual stain of the Watchers and their violent children, allowing creation a chance to begin anew. This narrative profoundly shaped the ancient understanding of the world. For early Jewish and Christian thinkers, the Nephilim story provided a cosmic explanation for the overwhelming presence of evil, the origins of demonic forces, and the reality of an ongoing battle between heaven and hell. It taught that the struggle was real, the stakes were ultimate, and that humanity was caught in the middle. The story of the Nephilim is a stark and timeless reminder that our existence unfolds on a contested ground, a spiritual battleground where unseen forces vie for dominion and where our choices, our faith, and our vigilance matter more than we could ever imagine. In the ancient tapestry of human history, some threads are woven with darker hues, stories of cosmic rebellion, of boundaries breached, and of a world so corrupted it had to be washed clean. Among the most enigmatic of these is the narrative of the Nephilim, the mighty ones of old, born of a forbidden union between the divine and the mortal. For millennia, this account has been viewed as a relic of a primordial age, a stark warning from a world long drowned. But for a growing number of interpreters, this story has not ended. It merely sleeps, waiting to cast its long shadow over the final chapter of humanity. Could this fragment of ancient lore be more than just history? Could it in fact be a key to understanding our future? An echo of a beginning that foretells the end? The search for this connection begins not in the mists of Genesis, but in the clear prophetic words of Jesus Christ, describing the conditions that would precede his own return. He offered a chillingly simple parallel. As it was in the days of Noah, he warned, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. He spoke of a world lost in the mundane, people eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, oblivious to the cataclysm gathering on their horizon. The overt meaning is a caution against spiritual apathy, a world willfully blind to impending judgment. But some scholars and theologians press deeper, asking a more unsettling question. What else defined the days of Noah? The surface-level indifference was merely a symptom of a far more profound sickness. The defining corruption of that era was a spiritual one, a unique transgression that had never happened before and has not happened since. The incursion of fallen angels and the birth of their hybrid offspring, the Nephilim. If the end is to be truly as it was in the days of Noah, must we look beyond human apathy and consider the return of a primordial evil? This line of inquiry gives rise to one of the most provocative and speculative theories in modern eschatology: the potential for a return of the Nephilim. This doesn't necessarily mean a literal reappearance of giants, but a resurgence of the conditions that created them. It suggests a final, desperate, angelic incursion, a last day's attempt to corrupt the human race in a way that mirrors the ancient defilement. It posits a future where the lines between human and non-human are once again blurred, a final great deception rooted in the subversion of creation itself, mirroring the very evil that first necessitated a global judgment. This idea, while startling, is not without its proposed textual footholds in other prophetic books. In the book of Daniel, the prophet interprets a dream of a great statue representing successive world empires. The final kingdom is described by its feet, a fragile mixture of iron and clay. The text itself offers an unnerving explanation. They will mingle themselves with the seed of men. While traditionally interpreted as the inherent weakness of political alliances, some see a more literal, sinister meaning. They propose this could be an echo of Genesis, a prophetic hint of a future attempt to mix human and non-human elements, be it through supernatural union or advanced genetic engineering, creating a final, unstable empire that carries the genetic ghost of the Nephilim. This theme of profound, supernatural deception intensifies in the New Testament. The Apostle Paul warns of a coming Antichrist whose rise is marked by all power and signs and lying wonders, empowered by Satan to deceive those who are perishing. The book of Revelation paints a vivid picture of a world mesmerized by a beast who performs great signs. When prophecy speaks of a deception so powerful it could, if possible, deceive the very elect, We must ask what kind of phenomena this would entail. Could it involve the appearance of beings of extraordinary power and intelligence, deceptive entities reminiscent of the sons of God, who so captivated humanity in the days before the flood? It is here that we must draw a careful line between explicit biblical prophecy and speculative interpretation. The Bible does not contain a verse that plainly states, "The Nephilim will return in the last days." To connect Daniel's clay, Paul's lying wonders, and Noah's giants requires a significant hermeneutical leap. And yet the thematic parallels are too powerful to ignore. The story of the Nephilim is a story of great wickedness, of divine judgment on a global scale, and of humanity's shocking susceptibility to cosmic corruption. These are not peripheral ideas. They are the very bedrock of eschatological discourse. Whether or not one anticipates a literal echo of Genesis 6, the enduring themes it established, of a boundary violently crossed and a corruption that demands divine intervention, are undeniably set to recur. The shadow of the Nephilim, therefore, lingers as a potent lens, a primordial blueprint for understanding the sheer scale of the evil that prophecy says will define the end of days. In the deep echo chambers of antiquity, a name is whispered. A fragment from a forgotten age etched into the opening pages of Genesis. Nephilim. Once confined to theological debate and the dusty shelves of scholars, this single enigmatic word has broken free. It has transcended its ancient confines to find a new and fertile home in the modern imagination. A vibrant, chaotic landscape of sensationalism, speculation, and popular culture. This is the story of how an ancient mystery was reborn for a new millennium, not as history, but as a living, breathing mythology. The journey begins at the fringes, where belief collides with the cosmos. Here the Nephilim are no longer the offspring of fallen angels, but the product of a different kind of visitation. The ancient astronaut hypothesis recasts the biblical narrative through a science fiction lens. The sons of God, in this telling, were not divine beings, but extraterrestrial visitors who descended from the heavens in celestial chariots. They saw the daughters of men, and a new Genesis began, one of genetic engineering and technological uplift. The profound mystery of faith is traded for a grand cosmic experiment, where ancient megaliths are seen as landing pads and sacred texts become logs of first contact. The Nephilim are reimagined as the first hybrids, the first inheritors of an alien legacy, their giant stature a sign of off-world biology. What if the gods we worshipped were never gods at all, but travelers from a distant world? This search for a physical truth spirals from the stars down to the earth itself. It fuels a modern cryptozoological quest, a hunt for tangible proof in the unexplored corners of our own world. The Nephilim narrative becomes conflated with local legends of giants, of Bigfoot, and the Yeti. Every anomalous fossil, every oversized bone fragment unearthed, is scrutinized as potential evidence. The legend becomes a physical pursuit, an attempt to anchor the myth in the material world. It is a desperate search for the bones of giants, driven by a conviction that if the creatures of myth were real, then the stories themselves must hold a literal, verifiable truth. A truth that many believe is being deliberately hidden from view. From the fringes of belief, the Nephilim stride confidently into the heart of popular culture. Stripped of their theological weight, they are reshaped into archetypes for a new age of storytelling. In fantasy novels, comic books, video games, and films, they are no longer a footnote to a great flood, but protagonists in their own right. They are the half-angelic, half-human heroes and villains, blessed and cursed with immense power, caught in the eternal conflict between heaven and earth. This reinterpretation taps into a deep human fascination with hybridity, the being who belongs to two worlds, but is at home in neither. They become potent symbols of alienation, power, and the struggle to define one's own identity against the legacy of one's parentage. The monsters of the old world have become the conflicted anti-heroes of the new. This cultural proliferation is amplified and accelerated by the digital age. The internet acts as a vast, unregulated archive and a global broadcasting system for every conceivable Nephilim theory. Websites, forums, and social media platforms allow ideas to spread with viral speed, blurring the lines between serious inquiry, creative fiction, and outright misinformation. Here, in the echo chambers of online communities, the Nephilim are woven into grander, more elaborate conspiracy theories. They are linked to ancient bloodlines that secretly rule the world, to shadowy cabals and secret societies that manipulate history from behind the curtain. The biblical account is merged with unrelated events, creating a sprawling, interconnected narrative of hidden influence and ancient power. And in this digital labyrinth, every coincidence becomes a clue, and every skeptic is part of the cover-up. This relentless drive towards sensationalism often comes at a cost. The quest for alien visitors and secret government plots can overshadow the profound philosophical and theological questions the original text invites. The Nephilim narrative was born from a desire to understand the nature of sin, the boundaries between the divine and the human, and the origins of evil in the world. When the focus shifts entirely to finding physical evidence or crafting fantastical histories, this deeper contemplative purpose is often lost. Yet even as speculation runs rampant, legitimate academic inquiry continues. Biblical scholars, archaeologists, and anthropologists use interdisciplinary tools to peer deeper into the ancient Near Eastern context, seeking not to prove the myth, but to understand what it meant to the people who first told it. To understand these modern interpretations is to understand ourselves. It reveals how every generation reclaims and reshapes ancient narratives to reflect its own anxieties, its scientific advancements, its spiritual yearnings, and its enduring fascination with the unknown. The story of the Nephilim is no longer just a passage in an ancient book. It is a mirror reflecting our own search for meaning in a world suspended between the mundane and the magnificent. It is a testament to the power of a story to adapt, to evolve, and to be endlessly reborn. Beneath our modern world, buried under layers of soil and sediment, lies a story. It is a story not just of civilizations that rose and fell, but of a question that has haunted humanity for millennia. A whisper etched in stone, a legend that refuses to die. The ancient texts, from the Bible to the Epic of Gilgamesh, speak of an elder race, beings of immense stature and formidable power, giants. And for centuries, this narrative has fueled a quest, transforming dusty excavation sites and hallowed burial grounds into arenas of breathtaking possibility. The search was not for pottery or tools, but for the very bones of myth. This is the intersection of faith and science, where the archaeologist's trowel probes the long shadow of Genesis. For generations, any unusually large bone unearthed from the earth was seen through a single lens. A femur the size of a man's torso, discovered in a European riverbed, was not the remnant of a mammoth, but the proof of Goliath's kin. The colossal vertebrae of a dinosaur, found weathering in a cliffside, were not pieces of a prehistoric reptile, but the skeletal remains of a fallen Nephilim. These were not acts of deception, but of interpretation. A world trying to make sense of its deepest legends with the evidence it had, mapping the monsters of scripture onto the fossils of a world far older than it knew. Nowhere was this phenomenon more potent than in North America. As settlers pushed westward, they encountered thousands of monumental earthworks, burial mounds built by sophisticated ancient cultures. Within some of these mounds, skeletons of remarkable size were occasionally found. Newspapers ran sensational headlines proclaiming the discovery of a lost race of American giants. But archaeology, in its slow, methodical march, would eventually tell a different story. These were the ancestors of today's Native American tribes, individuals of notable height, yes, but often buried in ways that could be easily misinterpreted. Yet, the myth of a vanquished giant race had taken root, a convenient legend that served to sever the connection between the land's living inhabitants and their own profound history. But if misinterpretation fueled the legend, raw deception would soon seek to cash in on it. In 1869, in Cardiff, New York, workmen digging a well struck something hard. What they unearthed was the figure of a 10-foot-tall petrified man. The Cardiff giant became a national sensation. Thousands paid to see the biblical giant, the fossilized proof of ancient scripture. Scientists who declared it a fraud were dismissed as faithless elites. It was, of course, a masterful hoax. A block of gypsum, carved in secret and artificially aged. The Cardiff giant wasn't a relic of a lost world. It was a monument to the power of belief, a testament to how desperately we want our myths to be real. Today, the tools of inquiry are far more precise. Physical anthropology can read a skeleton like a book, determining diet, disease, and stature with astonishing accuracy. And as we have mapped the human story through these bony remains, a clear picture has emerged. While individuals with gigantism have always existed, rare genetic conditions creating extraordinary height, the consistent archaeological record of ancient populations, from the Near East to the Americas, points to average statures largely within our own modern range. There is no widespread, unambiguous evidence of a distinct species of 9 or 10 foot tall humans. The giants of the Bible, it seems, have left no fossils. And so we stand at a crossroads of understanding. We have a sacred text that speaks plainly of giants, the Nephilim, the Rephaim, the sons of Anak, and a scientific record that thus far remains silent. How do we reconcile a story that has shaped civilizations with a ground that refuses to corroborate it? The challenge compels us to look deeper, not just into the earth, but into the language of the past. Could giant have meant more than just physical height? Perhaps it described a different kind of stature, immense power, terrifying influence, a king whose tyranny cast a giant's shadow over the land. Or perhaps these accounts are treasures of an ancient worldview, a time when the veil between the mythic and the material was simply thinner. The absence of a bone does not necessarily mean the absence of a truth. It may instead invite us to explore other possibilities, that the Nephilim narrative is a profound theological symbol, or a memory of specific, localized clans of tall warriors whose legend outgrew their reality. The quest for giants in the archaeological record, while yielding no titans, has revealed something equally profound about ourselves. Our need to connect with an epic past and our struggle to balance faith with fact. The earth may not hold the bones of the Nephilim, but the search itself unearths the very foundation of how we know what we know, demanding a rigorous mind, an open heart, and the wisdom to discern where the legend ends and the human story begins. In the deep echo of history, before the floodgates of heaven opened and a world was washed clean, there exists a whisper, a fragment of a story so strange, so unsettling, that it has haunted the edges of theology and myth for millennia. It is the story of the Nephilim. Despite centuries of sacred texts, scholarly debate, and fevered imagination, their narrative remains a wound in the world's memory, a mystery that does not yield to easy answers, but instead deepens with every question we dare to ask. This is not a search for a single truth, but an exploration of the shadows, an embrace of the profound enigmas that refuse to be solved. At the very heart of the tale is a deliberate ambiguity, a foundational question of identity. Who, precisely, were the sons of God? The question hangs in the air, creating two powerful currents of interpretation that have flowed through history. One tradition sees them as men, the righteous descendants of Adam's son Seth, who broke covenant by marrying into the corrupted line of Cain. A human tragedy of spiritual compromise. But another, older and more unsettling view imagines them as something else entirely. Celestial beings, angels who descended from their heavenly post, captivated by mortal beauty and crossing an unforgivable boundary between the spiritual and the physical. Neither view has achieved consensus, leaving the story's core motive forever shrouded in doubt. The timeline itself presents an impossible riddle. The ancient text of Genesis declares the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. Three simple words that challenge the very logic of the narrative. If the Great Flood was a divine judgment, a cataclysmic cleansing of an irredeemable world, how could this strange lineage persist? Were some spared? Did the transgression happen again? This single phrase suggests the corruption was not so easily erased, that the shadow of the Nephilim stretched long past the waters of the deluge. Even the mechanism of their creation defies our understanding. If the sons of God were indeed angels, beings of spirit, light and fire, how could they procreate with women of flesh and blood? Scripture typically describes them as messengers, warriors and guardians, not biological beings capable of reproduction. The union itself suggests a fracture in the cosmic order, a violation of the very nature of creation. Was it a miracle, a curse, or a science of a forgotten age? The puzzle of their origin is a theological and biological maze with no clear exit. And what of their nature? The word Nephilim is often translated as giants. But does this single word capture the whole truth? Was their power merely one of physical stature, of bone and sinew that dwarfed ordinary men? Or did their gigantism extend to other realms? Were they giants of intellect, of will, of spiritual power? Perhaps their terrifying greatness was not just in how they towered over men, but in the profound and alien way their minds worked, their hybrid souls resonating with a power this world was never meant to contain. The narrative inextricably links their presence to the world's descent into chaos. The earth, we are told, was filled with wickedness and violence. But what role did the Nephilim play? Were they the instigators, the architects of this corruption, their unnatural existence poisoning the very soul of humanity? Or were they merely a symptom of a world already in terminal moral decay, their birth a final monstrous bloom of a plant long since rotten at the root? The precise dynamics of their influence remain locked away in the pre-flood silence. Beyond the canon of Scripture, tradition offers a chilling postscript, the fate of their spirits. Some ancient texts propose that when these mighty beings died, their disembodied souls, too human for heaven and too angelic for the human afterlife, were cursed to roam the earth. They became the legions of restless spirits, the demons that would plague humanity for all time. While this idea is not found in the Bible, it speaks to a deep need to explain the origin of a persistent, unseen evil. Ultimately, the biblical text is sparse, offering tantalizingly few details. This very silence creates a vast canvas for interpretation. The gaps are filled with our own fears, our own beliefs, our own search for meaning. And within this space lies a difficult ethical question. If the world's corruption was instigated, or at least amplified by the transgression of supernatural beings, how do we understand the justice of a judgment that fell upon all of humanity? It forces a complex contemplation of divine fairness, human responsibility, and the nature of a fall that may have begun beyond the stars. To confront the story of the Nephilim is to confront the limits of our own knowledge. It is to accept that some ancient questions may remain forever unanswered, their purpose not to be solved, but to provoke. Their story endures, not as a clear historical record, but as a persistent and powerful enigma, its mystery enriching the sacred narrative and reminding us that the most profound truths often dwell in the realm of the unknown. In the grand and often silent expanse of the cosmos, humanity has always searched for its story, for a narrative that could explain its place in the universe. We look to the stars for answers, and to the earth beneath our feet for our history. But what if one of the most profound keys to understanding our role is found not in a scientific formula, but in an ancient, unsettling whisper from the dawn of time? A story of giants and fallen angels, of divine commands and the catastrophic consequences of choice. This is the enduring narrative of the Nephilim, a tale that refuses to be a mere historical footnote, and instead frames our very existence within a much larger and far more dangerous cosmic drama. This ancient account positions humanity in a precarious balance, at once fragile and vulnerable, yet simultaneously chosen and divinely favored. It speaks of a world where unseen forces are not just a matter of belief, but an active reality. A world where the veil between heaven and earth is terrifyingly thin. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about ourselves, our inherent susceptibility to corruption. Whether we see this as a story of direct angelic temptation, a dark union that defied the laws of creation, or as a metaphor for the unchecked proliferation of our own internal wickedness, the result is the same. Humanity is placed at a perilous crossroads, a place where the spiritual and the physical collide, reminding us that our world has never been governed by natural laws alone. It is a stage susceptible to incursions, to influences from a realm beyond our immediate senses. The answer, it seems, lies not in our strength but in our faith. The accounts of giants, from the towering Nephilim before the flood to their echoes in the post-deluge world, the Anakim, the Rephaim, Goliath of Gath, consistently serve as the ultimate test. They are the embodiment of the insurmountable, the physical manifestation of overwhelming fear. When faced with these adversaries, raw human power is rendered useless. It is in these moments of terrifying inadequacy that humanity is called to a radical choice: to trust in its own failing strength, or to place its reliance on a divine power that operates beyond the calculus of physical might. The spies of Israel saw giants in the Promised Land, and their hearts melted in fear, reporting that they seemed like grasshoppers in their sight. Their story became a cautionary tale of failed faith. But for those who would follow, the presence of giants became a crucible, a forge where true courage was defined not by the absence of fear, but by the presence of trust in the face of it. This confrontation with the extraordinary underscores a fundamental principle woven throughout the narrative: the vital importance of distinctiveness. God's people are called to be separate, to remain untainted by the pervasive corruption of the world around them. Whether that corruption stems from a literal, monstrous hybridity or from a more subtle yet equally profound moral compromise, the call is the same. It is a call to protect the sanctity of God's created order. The story of the Nephilim is a stark warning about the dire consequences of its perversion, a reminder that humanity was given a sacred responsibility to be stewards of this world and to be living image-bearers of a holy God. To blur those lines, to compromise that identity, is to invite catastrophe. In the shadow of these colossal figures, the very nature of heroism is redefined. The Nephilim were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Their fame was born of power, dominance, and likely of violence. They were the heroes of a world that worships strength. But the biblical narrative offers a radical counter-hero. It presents Noah, who finds renown not with a sword, but through obedience in building an ark against a backdrop of universal mockery. It gives us David, a shepherd boy, whose triumph comes not from equal might, but from faith in the face of a terrifying champion. Their victories are a powerful testament to a paradoxical truth, that God's power is made perfect in human weakness. They demonstrate that true strength is not the ability to dominate, but the humility to obey. Ultimately, the strange and mysterious story of the Nephilim is far more than a myth. It is a mirror. It reflects our deepest anxieties about the forces that lie beyond our control, but it also illuminates our highest calling. It serves as a potent, unsettling reminder that humanity, though we may feel small in comparison to the vastness of the universe and the darkness that sometimes inhabits it, is absolutely central to a divine redemptive plan. Our choices to obey or to rebel, to trust or to fear, are not insignificant. They have profound, far-reaching consequences, echoing in the physical and spiritual realms and shaping the very destiny of our world. In the ancient pages of Scripture, nestled between the genealogy of Adam and the cataclysm of the Great Flood, lies a brief, cryptic, and terrifying account. It is a story of boundaries dissolved, of a forbidden union between the heavens and the earth. It is the story of the Nephilim. The name itself echoes with power and mystery. The fallen ones, the giants, the mighty men of old, men of renown. For millennia, this narrative has been more than a historical footnote. It has been a wound in the blueprint of creation, a theological puzzle that resists simple answers. Its power is not found in its length, but in its depth. In the profound questions it forces us to ask about the nature of evil, the limits of creation, and the grand, unseen drama playing out just beyond our perception. To understand why this ancient story still matters, we must first recognize how it shatters our simplest narratives. The story of humanity is often told as a straight line, a perfect creation, a human fall, and a long journey toward redemption. But the Nephilim introduce a staggering complexity. They suggest that the fall of humanity was not the only corruption to stain the early world. They point to a rebellion that began not in a garden, but perhaps in the heavens themselves. A transgression that was not just human, but angelic. This narrative forces a deeper engagement with the very origins of evil, suggesting that the corruption infecting the world was multifaceted, a hybrid horror born of both human choice and cosmic defiance. How are we to understand our own story if it is so deeply entangled with a war that began before our time? This lens of cosmic conflict provides a crucial context for the most devastating judgment in the biblical record, the Great Flood. The text tells us the earth was filled with violence, that every inclination of the human heart was only evil all the time. But the Nephilim story offers a chilling explanation for why. It suggests a world where the very genetic and spiritual code of humanity was being compromised. The wickedness was not merely human depravity, but something more, a pervasive, monstrous corruption seeded by an otherworldly influence. The flood, seen through this lens, becomes more than a punishment. It is a desperate act of divine surgery, an attempt to cleanse the earth of a contamination that threatened to erase the image of God from his own creation. This framework for a world under spiritual siege did not end with the canonical texts. In extra-biblical writings, like the Book of Enoch, the story of the Nephilim explodes into a detailed cosmology of spiritual warfare. Here, the disembodied spirits of the slain giants are identified as the source of the demonic, wandering the earth to afflict and torment humanity until the final judgment. For countless ancient believers, and even for many today, this narrative provided a robust explanation for the unseen forces of evil, for temptation, and for suffering. It gave a name and a history to the shadows, transforming a vague sense of spiritual opposition into a direct, historical consequence of a primeval angelic fall. At its heart, the story of the Nephilim is a profound meditation on the sanctity of boundaries. It underscores a universe built on divine order, a separation between heaven and earth, between the spiritual and the physical, between the angelic and the human. The transgression of the sons of God was a violation of this sacred order, a perversion that unleashed chaos upon the world. The narrative serves as a stark warning about the severe consequences of crossing lines that God himself has drawn. A timeless lesson on the importance of purity and the danger of forbidden mixtures. It insists that some frontiers are not meant to be explored, and that the architecture of creation itself depends on these distinctions being honored. The enduring fascination with this story is proven by the firestorm of debate it still ignites. Scholars, theologians, and lay people continue to argue over the identity of the sons of God and the nature of their offspring. These debates reveal humanity's persistent struggle to reconcile profound biblical mysteries with scientific inquiry, archaeological evidence, and the rational limits of our understanding. The Nephilim stand at the crossroads of faith and reason, a testament to the fact that our most sacred texts contain elements that defy easy categorization, forcing us to grapple with a reality that may be far stranger and more complex than we can imagine. This grappling has left an indelible mark on our collective imagination. From the titans of Greek mythology to the epic poems of Milton, from ancient paintings to modern speculative fiction and blockbuster films, the echo of the Nephilim persists. Their story has become a cornerstone of our cultural memory, a recurring motif that reflects our deep-seated fascination with the extraordinary, the powerful, and the forbidden. They are the archetypal giants, the superhuman figures that haunt our myths and legends, reminding us that there was once a time when the world felt wilder, larger, and more terribly alive. Ultimately, the Nephilim narrative serves as a powerful theological prompt, calling us to a place of humility and wonder. It invites us to meditate on the character of a God who is at once holy and just, merciful and sovereign, even in the face of an evil that seems insurmountable. It reminds us that there are aspects of his creation and his history that remain shrouded in mystery, compelling us to approach the biblical record not with arrogance, but with reverence and an insatiable intellectual curiosity. The story, in its very ambiguity, becomes a catalyst for a vibrant, ongoing dialogue with our own faith. It does not offer easy answers. It offers a deeper, more challenging, and ultimately more rewarding engagement with the divine drama. It expands our theological imagination, forcing us to consider the profound implications of a world where heaven and earth are not distant realms, but interacting stages in a conflict that defines history itself. And so we ask, what does it mean to live in the shadow of such a story? Our journey begins where the shadows of history are longest. It is an invitation to engage with one of the Bible's most profound and challenging narratives, the story of the Nephilim. The questions it unearths are not easily settled, for they echo from the very dawn of time, whispers of a world both strangely familiar and deeply alien. This is not a conclusion, but a threshold. We ask you to move beyond passive observation, to embark on this exploration with us. Delve into the primary sources, reading Genesis 6 and Numbers 13 with fresh eyes and an open heart, allowing the sacred words to resonate anew. Together, we will venture into the rich tapestry of ancient Jewish and Christian thought, examining texts like the Book of Enoch, not as additions to canon, but as vital windows into how generations past wrestled with these same unsettling truths. This is a call to engage with complexity, to seek out diverse scholarly discussions, and to recognize that in the pursuit of ancient verities, intellectual humility is our most essential guide. For this is more than history. It is a story with enduring spiritual implications. What does this account of giants and fallen angels reveal about the pervasive nature of sin, the unseen reality of spiritual warfare, and the unwavering sovereignty of God in a world where good and evil contend for influence? Let this ancient story challenge you. Let it deepen your appreciation for divine holiness, His justice in judgment, and His astonishing mercy in salvation. It is a stark reminder that even in the face of daunting, seemingly insurmountable adversaries, a greater power is at work, a power that has already claimed the ultimate victory. The conversation starts now. We invite you to listen, to question, and to reflect. For the ancient whispers of giants are not silent. They are a call to a deeper spiritual and intellectual awakening.